Chapter 23 Smash Them All. The woman wore a silver mask that kept her entire face hidden and only allowed the sight of her slit sky-blue eyes. She was dressed in a provocative crimson dress that stopped above her knees and fully revealed her long, enthralling legs, while her heart-shaped neckband showcased her ample bosom. Yet, in her presence, those attributes were often disregarded for the sake of the innate aura of grandeur that shrouded her form. And even though she could not see her face and her long ink-like hairs wore no ornaments, Jasmine couldn't help but feel that this woman was the most beautiful she had ever met, that under the vast blue sky, she was unrivaled. The woman's back faced the assassin duo who stared at her with a growing sense of terror. Could it be? They began, but with her back still facing them, they didn't dare make guesses. In fact, they didn't dare be right. Even the eunuch whose arm had been lopped off and whose mangled face still dripped blood could pay no attention to the pain. His eyes were solely focused on that woman's back. But hers were on Conrad, who had already passed out and could no longer see any of the ongoing events. There was no warmth in those eyes. The only thing hidden within were mixtures of annoyance, frustration, and suspicion. "Who are you?" asked Jasmine while clinging on Conrad's unconscious body. But the woman gave her no answer. "Conrad," she whispered. Gentleness flashed within her eyes, and she turned to face the assassins. Ulrich's cruelty truly knows no bounds, even sending 2 royal eunuchs to cripple his son. But while that has nothing to do with me, you've harmed someone I care for. Thus, I cannot spare you. The Holy Flame Emperor Ulrich von Jürgen had 9 sons, but none were born from the Holy Empress. While legitimacy was never an issue for the children of the emperor, due to not being pure imperial descendants, they all de facto bore a stigma. In times like these, it was easier for a younger son to snatch the eldest's right to rule. Wenzel may not have had any desire for the crown, but his mother, the noble imperial consort Yvonne Voigt, had a different opinion and had been relying on her father's support to build a faction for him. This caused the emperor to become wary of the Voigt and what he now saw as their pawn within his house. Alongside the Kvass and the Metz, the Voigt were one of the 3 princely houses, and even the emperor had to treat them with courtesy. Thus, he dispatched 2 royal eunuchs to monitor Wenzel's actions and, at the first opportunity, cripple him as a man to not only ruin his ability to compete for the crown, but also obtain a secret that could be used to suppress the Voigt's unruliness. He didn't mind the news of Wenzel's accident being secretly spread. But for Yvonne, whose status within the harem relied on her having a prince, that was another story. As for the 2 royal eunuchs, they had navigated court politics for hundreds of years and knew well that there was a critical difference between having personally crippled an imperial prince and having arrived too late to stop it from happening. Therefore, they had been racking their brains to find a way to push Wenzel into his own destruction. Never did they expect that he would do it on his own. Now they could execute that eunuch boy with great pomp and report the situation to the emperor. At least that was the plan. But when the woman turned to face them, they immediately dropped onto their knees. We, His Majesty, we couldn't. They stuttered. From the current situation, it wasn't hard to deduce that the eunuch had a deep connection to her. That being the case, they could only beg for mercy. "Your Grace, we didn't know. Please, mercy." They say ignorance is bliss. I disagree. It is a crime all the same, one I punish by death. In a seemingly ordinary walk that tempered with principles of space and time, she moved past the eunuchs and vanished from the scene. They were astonished, thinking that ultimately she was giving the emperor face and sparing them. But then a shocking scene appeared, and the 2 eunuchs saw their bodies quickly turn into dust, from their feet all the way to their heads, until nothing of them remained within the world. Jasmine stared slack-jawed at that awe-inspiring display of might. "I hate nothing more than whiny women. If you want to keep him for yourself, why not fight for him? A woman should never be afraid of fighting for what she craves and snatching it from whoever stands in her way." The red-dressed woman's voice echoed within Jasmine's mind. Conrad's eyes opened to an unfamiliar room with his chest and legs cleanly bandaged, the lilac scent permeating the air leading him to assume that this was a female's quarters. You've awakened. Jasmine's voice came from his right, and he turned toward her sitting form with an incredulous gaze. We're neither dead nor in a torture room. Why should we be? She chuckled to his inquiry. I seem to recall us being in a hopeless situation. How is it that? Only then did the blurry silhouette he perceived before passing out return to his mind, and his face contorted into a frown. I thought you would be the one enlightening me. Wasn't that woman a friend of yours? Conrad also wished to positively answer that question, but beside confusion, there was nothing he could offer. It wasn't difficult to realize that the mysterious woman was the one that warned him about Jasmine's crisis. But as for what connection she had to him, he could find none whatsoever. His mind browsed through the previous body host's memories to seek an answer to those troubling issues, but nothing matched that figure. Yet, he was convinced of their mysterious savior having something to do with the previous Conrad. As for what exactly, only time would tell. And since no viable answer could be found, Conrad would not waste any more time on the issue. Forget it. Being alive and well is all that matter. But then his eyes swept the perimeter and spotted the two other occupied beds in the vicinity. You brought me back to the maid's quarters? Isn't that illegal? You also know that it is illegal? I thought the notion was foreign to you. But what else could I do? I do not know where you live, and I could not abandon you. Fortunately, at this time of night, most people are sound asleep. In any case, as far as Conrad was concerned, the maid courtyards were no different than swimming pools. Keeping the situation under control required no effort. Still, I should take my leave. As his regeneration abilities had already mended his wounds, there was no significance in staying any longer. But before he could stand up, Jasmine's firm gaze met his, and she stopped him by grabbing his shoulders. Thank you again for saving me. I don't know what would have happened without your interference. That is only natural. I said it before, for the rest of your life, you can only be my woman. His categoric tone was too brazen for Jasmine to handle without a small blush. However, she didn't intend to let him go that easily. Me excluded, how many women do you currently have in your life? Conrad lifted his chin with his index while doing the quick math, then replied. It really depends on the token you're assigning them. If you mean partners, I have 13. If you mean actual relationships, only one person potentially qualifies. That was the truth. At the current point of things, the women he had conquered could only be used to fill in the blanks. He felt no genuine attachment to them and crudely said they could be labeled as dual cauldrons. Ileana was the only exception, but he had yet to seal that deal. So to speak, of course, that can change in the future. There were some promising seedlings among his recent conquests that could perhaps be given more prominent positions within the harem. Meanwhile, Jasmine was speechless. How was it possible for a man to dally with so many women at the same time? Wasn't he afraid of early impotence? Huh, you really are a gaping hole. Anything can fit inside. Those words didn't have the same meaning within their minds. Upon hearing them, Conrad's lips twitched, and an abundance of black lines appeared on his forehead. Tolerate. A great man should be tolerant. However, what followed almost caused him to lose balance and fall face first. But for me, it's all but the same. Whether you only treat them as mere partners or have some budding feelings for them, it doesn't matter. I will smash them all to pieces. Her fighting spirit soared, and her eyes burned with a fervor Conrad didn't know she possessed. A fervor that propelled his body temperature to dangerous heights and caused droplets of sweat to drench his forehead. I'm not sure I heard that right. You will what? Smash them all. For far too long, I've let myself get pushed left and right. It is time I take the reins of my life, and that begins by snatching you for myself and showing you the wonders of monogamy while you lie broken under my skirt. Also, you're going to help me smash them by teaching me how to cultivate. Chapter 24, Then Teach You I Shall. Was this one of the wondrous mysteries of night? Had the little animal turned into a lioness in such short a time? There was a mixture of incomprehension and awe within Conrad's eyes as he stared into Jasmine's. His silent stare carried on long enough for discomfort to settle within her. Why are you staring at me like that? She asked after a moment, but Conrad only tilted his head to the left and maintained his silent stare. By any chance, are you a newly reincarnated soul? What? Nothing. He cleared his throat, discarding his doubts and reorganizing his thoughts. I already wanted to teach you. You needed not ask. The problem is I have no idea of what you're suited for. The martial path? The spiritual path? Both? So, let's first return to my chambers. I will bring you to a special place and teach you some mnemonics. If you can comprehend them, it will make everything else much easier for the both of us. Aptitudes for the spiritual and martial paths could only be tested in two ways: the straightforward way of being given mnemonics to comprehend, or being checked for a special physique that favored a path over the other. If the comprehension level was sufficiently high, both paths could be cultivated. However, there was only so much time. So unless there also was a special physique to facilitate cultivation, most people would just focus on the one they were best at. I'm warning you though, the mnemonics I will teach you are of a high standard, so don't be discouraged if you fail to comprehend them. The resolve within Jasmine's eyes was unchanged, and seeing that undaunted side of her, Conrad's appraisal of her rose to a higher level. Without delay, he brought her back to the quarters he shared with his two roommates and pulled out his spatial pouch. Don't be afraid, he reassured before tossing the spatial pouch above their heads. It enlarged, released boundless suction force, and swallowed them both within its world. They landed in the miniature world right in front of the mansion that caused Jasmine's eyes to widen with disbelief. She wasn't as surprised by the space treasure as she was by its content. This lavish 5-story tall building was styled in an architecture that seemed completely foreign to her, and inwardly, she wondered if her vision was too narrow or she'd been brought to another universe. Come. Conrad extended his hand toward her. She accepted it, and together they went inside. The sky-high walls, damask ground, and towering chandeliers that covered the ceiling were initially hard to digest. But quickly, she got used to the mansion's luxuries, and by the time they reached the room Conrad had chosen for them, her eyes no longer moved left and right. The queen-sized bed and velvet sheets standing in the middle of the room, the flame-red decorations that breathed passion, and the lack of unnecessary furniture made clear the room's purpose. Jasmine's cheeks were flushed red, something that didn't escape Conrad's watchful eyes. Don't let your thoughts drift. That will only happen if you can comprehend the mnemonics. He laughed, an unbridled laugh that caused a sense of shame to flash within Jasmine's eyes. But quickly, she set it aside. In any case, wasn't the plan to press him hard enough that he wouldn't have any energy left for the others? That being the case, there was no need to be bashful. In tandem, they sat cross-legged on the bed, and Conrad imparted the mnemonics of the 100 Flowers scripture onto her. While changing cultivation methods wasn't too great an issue, it usually harmed the foundation. For that reason, most people would stick with one method for a lifetime and directly go for the highest they could afford. However, methods within the system that could be upgraded didn't have that issue, since the upgrades were for all intent and purposes a higher version of the same technique. For that reason, Conrad felt at ease cultivating and imparting the 100 Flowers scripture onto her. Jasmine kept her eyes closed, cleansed her mind of any distraction, and focused solely on comprehending the first mysteries of the scripture. Meanwhile, Conrad revolved it and silently cultivated. This miniature world wasn't just a glorified storage room. As a high-grade grand artifact, it possessed rich enough spiritual chi for someone to train to the peak of the grand rank. However, it held very little use in the cultivation department for someone beyond that level. Strands of white light emerged from his body, flower petals rose from his pores and danced around him while pink mist oozed. An hour of soundless cultivation passed in a flash, an hour after which Jasmine's eyes slowly opened with the same phenomena of light and flowers now emerging from her body. Conrad was alarmed. As the owner of the system, he didn't need to comprehend the methods, but he still had a good understanding of their difficulty. The 100 Flower scripture wasn't your run-in-the-mill method. To comprehend it meant talent in both the martial and spiritual paths, and to comprehend it at such speed could only mean that Jasmine was a rarely seen talent. Alas, if not for meeting him, that talent would have never been put to good use. Thus a good birth is in itself a talent, and good fortune shall make even the lowest ascend to greatness. His lips curled into a gentle smile, a smile Jasmine took as a sign of approval, an approval that delighted her. What? Impressed? Slack-jawed? Speechless? Am I not better than all those other gals? Unrivaled among my peers? With a woman like me, what else do you need? It's not too late to swear off mistresses. Otherwise, when I start dealing with them, heh. The smug display caused Conrad's eyes to roll back, but he could sense the comedy and lack of seriousness within her tone. She would indeed fight to make him hers alone, but she certainly didn't plan to bring harm to anyone to achieve that. At least not physical harm, or maybe just a little. Hum. I give you a passing grade. Just a passing grade? Having grown on stories of cultivators spending weeks and months to comprehend spells and methods, she believed she had done well enough to be dubbed outstanding. Never did she expect that his appraisal would be so low, and suddenly her mood was soured. But at the same time, her fighting intent was kindled. If this weren't enough, she would only need to try harder. Seeing that she wasn't discouraged, Conrad was pleased. The method I've given you is a dual cultivation technique. Do you know what that means? The stories of rogues using females as cauldrons to empower themselves were not unfamiliar to Jasmine, but knowing Conrad wouldn't harm her, she assumed they would both benefit from the intercourse. I know, she nodded, trying to appear unfazed despite the rosy tint of her cheeks. In any case, how different could it be from that time? Then let's cultivate. Don't forget to draw in spiritual energy and revolve it using the method. It's important that you pay attention to that to maximize the benefits. Conrad taught with a mischievous grin. So we start, just like this? How would you want us to start? She reminisced their first time that was full of tenderness and rising passion. In comparison, this seemed too abrupt. But before she could say anything else, Conrad vanished and appeared at her back, his arms wrapped around her neck while his lips approached her left ear. Would you want me to tell you that your beauty transcends the sun and moon? That it is in your scent that I find the delights of life? Would you want me to press my lips against your ear and whisper my admiration? The feeling of his warm body enlacing hers caused her heart rate to shoot up. Or rather, he laid her with her back on the bed and his face standing above hers. His sweet breath grazed her nose, and the mesmerizing scent of orchids rippling from him assaulted her senses. Just show you. Then he leaned in, taking her lips in a passionate kiss. Good. This is good. She thought as the feeling of their intertwining tongue, and rising heat cleansed her mind of any extra thoughts. Words became superfluous, unnecessary ornaments that would distract them from the task of bringing one another to paradise. So, they no longer bothered with them. Conrad freed her of her robe and undergarments, while she did the same to him. He broke their kiss, moving down to her nether regions with his tongue bared and his shaft hardening against her face. Instinctively, she pressed it firmly within her hand, extending it with gentle strokes before taking it into her mouth. At the same time, his tongue latched on her clit, and his fingers teased her fold, causing the holy nectar she contained to drip without restraint. And quickly, a tantalizing slurping sound was the only thing available within the room. Their rising moans stifled by their mutual service duty. White light burst from their forms, pink mist rose from their pores, and hundreds of flowers bloomed and shrouded their tangling bodies as they revolved the 100-flower scripture and dual cultivated. Then they spun, lying on their shoulders with their legs collaring each other's necks and their faces still in each other's crotches. Jasmine couldn't help but let out as Conrad's masterful play of her drenched fold caused jolts of electricity to spread through her body. His hands rested on her buttocks and hers on his, but as he sensed her impending orgasm, he stopped, removed his tongue from her sex, and caused her to gasp in frustration. She didn't have time to complain before he spun into sitting and motioned for her to dive into his arms, which she did, wrapping her arms around his neck and rubbing her sex against his throbbing rod that now glittered in golden light. A benefit of their cultivation? She didn't care, too occupied with her furious masturbation on her lover's shaft. On her moans and rubbing teased Conrad's rod. He embraced her slim waist and let her slip onto his cock. Cultivate. She shouldn't forget that the entire purpose of this was to cultivate. But when pleasure reached such fantastic heights, how could she focus? She laid on his cock, legs outstretched with her hands holding his cheeks, and kissed him impetuously to suppress her moans while moving down his shaft and causing his balls to slap her butt cheeks. The sound of deep lovemaking soon filled the room, with more intense moans replacing their predecessors, while the two moved their waists and brought each other to heaven. The initial tender moves soon became instinct-driven thrusts that carried the two of them to the so-desired peak. Mhhhhhhhh. Jasmine groaned in Conrad's mouth as her body clenched on his, and her orgasm took her. He followed suit, unloading his large stream of semen within her. The scripture caused their minds to intertwine, sharing the feelings and bliss they felt within one another's arms. But they were only getting started and switched to other positions to better explore their sexuality and bring out all the boons of the 100-flower scripture. The intense dual cultivation session came to an end with Jasmine collapsing in the mermaid position while panting for breath. Fifth, it is the fifth. May the divine Lord have mercy on me. I can't continue. Admitting defeat. She conceded with her back resting on his chest. It seemed the plan of making him lie broken under her would need to receive some tweaks. But in the meantime, large streams of spiritual energy flooded her body and mind, taking her from a mortal with no cultivation base to the 5th step adept knight and 1st step adept priest in one go. Chapter 25. The Purple Flame Mark awakens. Even for Jasmine, who still had a shallow understanding of the cultivation world, the sudden breakthrough in cultivation brought by the dual cultivation sessions seemed too large to be normal. She attributed that quick rise to Conrad's method and sat cross-legged to digest her gains. Meanwhile, although Conrad had profited very little in terms of cultivation advancement, his understanding of the 100-flower scripture had reached a new level. He sat in the lotus position and channeled it to explore his new discoveries. The 100-flower scripture was divided into 3 layers, each bringing with it an attribute. Attributes should not be confused with the elemental spells priests could conjure. They were ingrained in the spiritual energy and brought with them countless benefits. Mastering an attribute before the arch rank was a challenging task that most talents failed to accomplish. But as long as Conrad could reach the first layer of the 100-flower scripture, he would unlock his first attribute, light. Pink mist moved across his pores, and within his body, his sky-blue pagoda was shrouded by a growing purple haze. That purple haze then merged with the pagoda, which subsequently released blinding light that caused Conrad's body to sparkle. And just like that, he had reached the first layer of the 100-flower scripture. But at that time, the purple flame mark on his right arm shone, and by the time he opened his eyes, he was no longer sitting by Jasmine's side, but floating within a world of clouds. The hell? Conrad's eyes widened in disbelief as he swept the perimeter. You wish. Hell is a much more entertaining place than this. A voice echoed from the back of his head. He turned to face it and was surprised to see a tall, handsome man standing at almost 1.9 meters with long jet-black hairs, violet eyes, and a large open coat that showcased his muscular, bare chest. But those attributes paled in comparison to the pair of goat horns that protruded from his forehead. Who the hell are you? Conrad asked warily. While he couldn't see his own appearance in his demonic form, the goat horns were attributes he also possessed. And if it weren't for him being unable to feel any energy signature from the man standing in front of him, he would have assumed him to be of demonic blood. You can think of me as your tutor and guardian. I helped you take down the woman that was trying to kill you before. Remember? The sight of Freya driving her sword toward him in an almost fatal blow resurfaced within Conrad's mind. Or rather, you helped me help you. Was it not for your strong will to live, it would have taken more time and energy for me to awaken. The man stated with a devilish grin. Conrad rose from his seated position and the clouds below him were like an ethereal ground that allowed him to walk toward the demonic man. And if anyone witnessed the two face one another, they would be surprised to see the striking resemblance of their faces. Since you brought me here, I assume you have important things to say. Not say, teach. All highborn demons possess birthmarks that grant them a preternatural understanding of the world and their duties. Call it wisdom of the ancestors if you will, but as a half, yours took a lot of time to activate. In fact, was it not for the previous Conrad dying and being replaced by you, I'm afraid I would have never been able to rise. You know that. But quickly, Conrad's initial shock was erased. If that thing had been present within his predecessor, then it was likely to have witnessed everything that happened. Of course I do. I know everything about you. But that is of no consequence. In fact, it's better for everyone. Your predecessor was a good kid. But as far as demons are concerned, he was a complete and utter failure. For the mighty house of Talroth to have produced such an offspring would have probably been His Majesty's greatest shame. But let's not step away from our intended purpose. I'm here to teach you two things. All that is to know about your bloodline and abilities, and your duty in this mortal plane. Hearing the word duty, Conrad's face contorted into a frown. I have no interest in taking part in the schemes of board elders. You can choose not to care, but others will not let you not care. To make things simple, the ancient crystal world you currently reside in is like all the other mortal worlds, a proxy battlefield between the Deva-ruled celestial realm, also known as heaven, and the demon-ruled infernal realm, also known as hell. In immemorial times, the ruling gods of the two realms decided to use mortal worlds as proxy battlefields instead of directly engaging each other. This ancient crystal world is divided into two continents. The Holy Continent ruled by the Celestial Church and the Barbarian Continent ruled by the Infernal Cult. Those two forces have been directing wars and conflicts for hundreds of thousands of years, causing countless genocides and almost bringing the sentient beings to extinction. The sea of new information took Conrad aback. He already knew that the Holy Flame Church was only one of the 5 branches of the Celestial Church, but he still had no idea of how powerful of an entity it really was. But quickly, his eyes revealed doubt. This world's human history is not that long. The Holy Flame Empire is the oldest recorded country but has not existed for more than 100,000 years. That is because every time the sentient beings come close to extinction, those two forces sign an armistice, erase all recorded information of the past civilizations, and let what remain of the different races breed and produce new generations. They have been repeating that process for quite some time, and it is very likely that a new war of extermination will happen very soon. At the earliest, several months. At the latest, several years. Conrad was alarmed. What kind of power was required to so seamlessly control the history of all those races across such a terrifying amount of time? But why? Why engage in such bloody slaughter? Just for the sake of distant gods? It makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. Those two forces each possess their own divine altar that records merits. The more they kill of the other side's believers, the more merits they accumulate. Although they could also gain the same amount through conversion, it's much easier to just kill the opponent. Merits can be exchanged for mighty boons granted by the gods themselves. And if one side can ultimately triumph over the other, its leaders can receive the privilege of ascending to the higher realms and being ennobled in the courts of their chosen deities. It's not even impossible for them to become gods in their own rights. No wonder they were willing to go to such lengths. Most established saints are aware of these realities, which is why they often leave the secular world to join the churches as high-ranking officials. Now I hope you understand why you can't escape. You can try, but it will not end well. The blood of Talroth marks you as a prime target for the Celestial Church. I believe they gain more merit by killing you than by killing a barbarian saint. What? Conrad staggered. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and his entire body was shaken by violent tremors. Worth more than a saint. How could he breathe? But then the description of the 100 Flowers scripture echoed within his mind. Creator, Talroth, fourth king of hell, lord of lust, ruler of all sex demons. Could it be? Who or what is the Tauroth you mentioned? And what is my relationship with him? His Majesty the Southern King of Hell. 1,000,000 years ago, he enslaved Asmodeus and took ownership of the southern domain as its new king. None has managed to shake his position ever since. Most noble houses in Hell bear their founder's name. As for the relationship, he's your father. Come again? Cheap. Too cheap. How could it be possible for him to gain such a cheap father? After endless preparations, your mother managed to forge a master-servant contract with him and received the privilege of carrying one of his offspring. You were supposed to be a cutting-edge weapon in the upcoming war, but your predecessor's lack of talent and frustrating disposition caused her to lose faith. She hoped sending him into the palace would cause traumatic enough experiences to awaken his bloodline. But even in death, he failed to man up. I recommend you find an opportunity to escape the palace as soon as possible and contact her. It was easier to kill incubi than to harm their genitalia. If the previous Conrad had managed to awaken his bloodline, he would have quickly recovered his rocks. But he didn't. Conrad was overwhelmed by all the things he had just learned. Having a mighty father might seem appealing to most, but in the heart of the Holy Flame Empire, that lineage could only bring him harm. I heard identifying incubi is impossible if they don't reveal their demonic energy signature. That is incorrect. Nigh impossible is the correct answer. There is an ability called Origin Sight that allows its user to not only spy on people from a distance, but to also figure out all their innate characteristics. And if I'm not wrong, the Holy Flame Church has more than one person wielding that ability. If for some reason they use it on you, you're done for. Conrad was puzzled. Was it possible that Origin Sight was the real reason behind his predecessor's death? But if that was true, in any case, what you do in the future depends solely on yourself. As for me, my second task is to teach you what you have yet to learn about your abilities, especially lineage weapons and demonic contracts. The man would then carry on with instructing him on how to use certain abilities like the incubi's innate illusion powers and the different types and functions of demonic contracts. When you return to the real world, you can stimulate your blood to summon your lineage weapon. Wielding it, your strength will drastically soar, and fighting across an entire rank will be simple. But remember, it possesses a clear demonic signature. Thus, if you unleash it, make sure no undesirable witness remains. Never forget that the primary drive of powerful incubi is not lust. It is domination. Be wary of the Celestial Church. All that needed to be said has been. I will be available if you have any future questions, but for now, get the fuck out. And so Conrad was expelled. Chapter 26, First Demonic Contract. Partnership of Equals. Conrad's eyes opened to the sight of Jasmine processing her gains at his front with her body stilled bare and refined by her improving cultivation. It appeared the flame mark altered his perception of time, and he had only left for an instant. He stopped his cultivation, got dressed, and waited for her to finish while pondering the critical issue of whether to reveal his true parentage or not. He wasn't concerned about her freaking out, as he could effortlessly modify her memories if he so wished. But doing so would denaturalize a relationship he was starting to find rather entertaining. And as he tackled the issue within his mind, Jasmine's eyes opened. "How long have you been staring at me like that?" Conrad had not realized that while lost in thoughts, his eyes had locked on her naked form with a blank stare. Disgraceful. Hum. I have been meaning to tell you something relatively important. I'm a demon. What? I'm a demon. I heard the first time. It didn't seem like it. The fast exchange caused Jasmine's eyes to blink at breakneck speed while droplets of sweat formed on her forehead. What kind of demon? An incubus. Wait, that's what you're worried about. Seeing her eyes shine with a sense of awareness, Conrad realized she was more concerned about the nature of his demonic heritage than with him being a demon. No wonders. The first time we met, I knew there was something off about you, but I couldn't put my fingers on it. Afterward, I thought it was just a result of your cultivation, but now it doesn't seem to be the case. Back then, he used his demonic aura to make her more open to suggestions. Why aren't you frightened? He could smell no fear from her body, a reaction vastly different and more irrational than Ileana's when she first learned of his true nature. All I know about demons is hearsay. Paragon spirits are supposedly the noblest creatures of the Holy Continent, but Wenzel is a true degenerate. In other parts of the world, serpents are supposedly symbols of sneaky and untrustworthy behavior. Yet, in the Holy Flame Empire, they are among the highest-ranking noble races. As for us humans, we are branded as slaves whose sole worth is to serve. Who cares about you being a demon? As long as you're not the type that needs to kill and torture to grow, it doesn't matter. The who is more important than the what. Demon or not, I will still conquer you. Conrad was speechless. He had not expected her to be this broad-minded, and somehow felt ashamed of his initial apprehension. That being the case, what would you say about signing a contract? A contract? An actual demonic contract like in the legends? Not quite. What I offer you is the partnership of equals. If you accept it, you will become a true member of my household, and we shall share mind and blood. Among other things, your cultivation speed will soar. In a nutshell, you will always have a slice of my pie and I of yours. Jasmine's eyes lit up. She didn't care about all the mentioned cultivation benefits. What truly grabbed her attention was that the terms were very similar to a marriage contract. Hee. She had yet to put a ring on his finger that he was delivering himself to her doorsteps. Of course, she would not let him go. I agree. In theory, forcing a demonic contract was impossible. Both parties had to be willing for it to occur. Of course, there were ways to force willingness. Conrad cut his lips, causing blood to trail down his chin and paint his mouth in red. He then waved his sleeves and conjured 5 purple pentagrams that hovered around the two of them. Jasmine stepped forward. She didn't hesitate, stood up and walked toward him. Are you willing in all conscience to abandon your humanity for my demonic blood? I am willing. Are you willing in all conscience to forsake your lineage and ancestry for the right to join my household? I am willing. To forever brand your soul with the mark of my lineage? I am willing. Then I, Conrad of the House of Talroth, welcome you to the fold of demonkind as my chosen kin and bind myself to you through spirit and blood. Massive purple light exploded from the pentagrams and shrouded the two of them while Conrad took Jasmine within his arms and kissed her with his bloodied lips. Parts of his demonic essence flew past his mouth, dived into her and mixed with her bloodline, turning her from a pure-blooded human being to a half-succubus. Her cultivation base experienced another breakthrough, going from the 5th step Adept Knight to the 1st step True Knight, and from 1st step Adept Priest to the 6th step Adept Priest. Meanwhile, her innate comprehension level and cultivation talent were added to Conrad's and a part of his to hers. Thus, the pact was sealed. Conrad then placed the harem ring on her finger and left her to adjust to her new self. In the meantime, within a pavilion of the Holy Empress Palace, 2 breathtaking women were engaging in a chess match. One was dressed in an elegant backless white maxi dress that outlined her perfect hourglass figure and possessed curly silver hairs and eyes that made her paragon spirit heritage evident. She was the Holy Empress, Verena Kvass. The other was a crimson-dressed woman with long ink-like hairs and slit blue eyes that were the only thing discernible beneath her silver mask. She was the Holy Consort, Else Metz. And with the Dowager in seclusion, those two were the most powerful women of the Holy Flame Empire. Your last move was not bad. Reshaping Wenzel's memories to make him forget who truly harmed him, and then using him to turn Yvonne against the Emperor and gain her support. I must say I'm impressed. But are you not afraid that when His Majesty comes looking for answers, I will reveal the little stunt you pulled? Although she rarely intervened in matters of the inner court, the Holy Empress was fully aware of the various consorts' daily moves. That night, she had been monitoring Else, and was surprised to see her intervene in a matter directly related to the Emperor for the sake of a eunuch boy. More surprising was that despite knowing that she was being monitored, Else didn't hesitate to act. And while she subsequently used that matter as a tool to obtain the support of Wenzel's mother, it was clear the original intent was to save that boy. Verena was perplexed as to why else who never made any rash move would risk offending the emperor for the sake of a 17-year-old eunuch. As the leader of the inner court, your majesty is by right my older sister. That being the case, I don't see why I should be afraid of my older sister revealing my secrets. Also, if there is something we can all agree on, it's that antagonizing the emperor is your favorite activity. Else nonchalantly replied while moving a black pawn. Touché. I do not care about any of that. I'm more interested in the eunuch boy you seem so fond of. Could he be a man you snuck into the palace to be your little lover? Or is there a deeper story here? Verena teased with her lips curled in a mischievous smile. I didn't know your majesty had such an interest in gossiping. Don't all bored women love spicy gossips? As the country's most unentertained woman, it is only natural that I also have some interest in them. Verena replied while moving a white pawn. If you're that interested, why not make a full inquiry? Investigate as you wish and see what you can find out. I have nothing to hide. Will you really not mind? As long as your majesty doesn't go beyond a certain point, I will of course not mind. Verena's interest was only heightened. But looking at the chessboard, it seemed Elsa's pawn was about to reach promotion. As for what it would turn into, she didn't know. Chapter 27. Go get your milk elsewhere. Well then, I shall take you up on your offer. And so the chess match was brought to a halt. Else left the Empress Palace and returned to hers where the blue-haired lady, Conrad could have easily recognized as the one that sentenced his predecessor to death, awaited with a deferential stance. Welcome back, your grace, she greeted upon seeing Else step into the main hall. Tamara, what are you waiting here for? Don't you have tasks to attend to and connections to weave? Your grace, I was wondering, why didn't you hide your recent moves from the Empress' sight? With your current cultivation, it would have been impossible for her to monitor you if you didn't allow her to. The world only knew that Else was a martial arts genius and had reached the Holy Knight rank decades ago. But only a scant few knew that she was also a spiritual genius and had reached the holy rank in both paths. Her silver mask was a holy artifact that made her spiritual cultivation completely untraceable. Why hide? If Verena wants to play with fire, let her burn. Your grace, this is far too reckless. If the Empress ever realizes the bloodline of that boy, we're doomed. Tamara panicked in front of Elsa's indifference. Wasn't your initial plan to use him as a tool to tame the consorts and ultimately target the Empress? Why is it that now that he can achieve that, you seem so terrified? Tamara possessed the rare origin sight ability and thus quickly became aware of the previous Conrad's incubus nature. Back then, Else had asked her to keep watch on him while she left the palace to seal an important deal in person. But although she tried to let nothing transpire, it was clear that boy caused Else to act in strange manners. Thus, Tamara chose to test him. If they could use him, she would train him into a weapon to subjugate the resisting consorts. If they could not, she would take matters in her own hands and get rid of that time-ticking bomb that could at any time be used against her mistress. The previous Conrad proved himself useless, and it was clear that his bloodline would never awaken in a lifetime. Yet, that blood was still there. So, she no longer hesitated and had him canned to death. But what she had not expected was that by the time Else returned and learned of the events, she beat her until she was half an inch away from death. Only when signs of Conrad's life force miraculously reappeared within the inner court did she spare her life. She had always believed herself to be the closest person to Else within the inner court, but she was ready to brutally execute her to avenge that boy. It was impossible for their relationship not to be extraordinary. And that was a grave issue because even now, thanks to her origin sight, Tamara could see that Conrad's bloodline had risen from a half to a pure-blooded incubus. How he achieved that, she didn't know. But the fact of the matter was that a pure-blooded demon now resided within the inner court and was being sheltered by Else. Your grace, I do not understand why you care so much for that boy, but I implore you to act with lucidity. The Holy Empress is the Dowager's niece. The Dowager is one of the leading priestesses of the Holy Flame Church that has always been looking for ways to exterminate us. The chance of this ending with our heads rolling on the floor is way too high. For the sake of the souls we must avenge, please reconsider. Meanwhile, Conrad now stood within his dungeon in front of his gathered female captives. Those he had already conquered looked at him with yearning, while the rest stared onto the ground with evident dread. I'm giving you all an opportunity to sign a contract of eternal servitude with me. Agree, and henceforth, you shall join my household as servants and receive the benefits that implies. Refuse, and I have no further use for you. He coolly declared. Freya and the priestesses that had tasted the golden rod had already fallen on their knees in submission. We agree. Quickly, the two court ladies and remaining palace maids followed suit. Although unlike Freya, they didn't have a clear understanding of Conrad's true nature and didn't know what the contract really implied, they didn't want to die. Unlike the partnership of equals that had limited quotas, the number of allowed master-servant contracts was infinite. Conrad executed the ritual and imprinted their chests with the mark of servitude of House Talroth, a pair of purple butterfly wings. Overall, their cultivations rose. Those at the adept rank saw their cultivation rise by 2 steps. Those at the true rank by 1, and the 2 court ladies at the grand knight rank were close to break through another level. And as Conrad's cultivation rose, so would theirs. As for himself, he had obtained all their cultivation talents as well as their absolute obedience. Not only that, but with a thought, he could decide their life and death. Their minds were also open books for him to browse through. Freya, step forward. Yes, master. Freya didn't hesitate and stepped toward him. How much access do you have to House Shunair's finances? Freya was puzzled as to why her master was now interested in the finances of her husband's house, but still replied. My husband greatly dotes on me and gives me full access to his bank accounts and assets, but those only represent 1/3 of House Shunair's finances. The remaining 2/3 are within the hands of my brother-in-law, Count Wilhelm Shunair. Wilhelm Shunair was the contemporary head of House Shunair and Torsten's elder brother. He was said to be a 6th-step transcendent knight. At how much can you estimate the part your husband controls? About 50 to 60 million purple crystals. I give you 1 week to put it all in my hands. What? Freya believed she didn't hear him right, and so gave him an incredulous stare. Need I repeat myself? No, master, I will deliver. Good. Execute this task, and I will help you quickly return to your previous level and even go beyond. Hearing that, Freya was overjoyed. Her cultivation loss had been a great blow to her self-esteem, and she was eager to regain it. As for why Conrad was targeting House Shunair, it was because they were the easiest fat sheep to target. Initially, he planned to auction the 3 low-grade grand-level spiritual methods he had exchanged from the system to make a solid profit and establish himself financially. However, with the recent developments, it was obvious he would need to prepare himself to escape from the palace. And not just escape, but escape with enough resources that he could effortlessly establish himself elsewhere and build his own faction. Torsten Shunair, I have nothing against you, but for the sake of my survival, I must use your wife to screw you over. Sorry. The eunuchs still in cages observed this scene with horror. How was it possible for them to have fallen in the hands of a pure-blooded demon? Was there still hope for survival? And as if he aware of their thoughts, Conrad turned toward them. There is still hope for you. Condense your entire cultivation bases into pills, and I will erase your memories, then allow you to leave. They were 5 high-level true knights, with the weakest being at the 7th step and the strongest being at the 9th step. If they condensed their entire cultivation bases into pills, Conrad could use them to improve the cultivation of his women. But the price would be the loss of a lifetime of hard work. Still, they didn't hesitate. After collecting the pills they produced, Conrad used his incubus abilities to erase their minds and implant some false memories within before sending them on their way. He then brought Jasmine and Freya out of the miniature world. After obtaining a half-succubus bloodline, Jasmine's innate charm had risen to a brand new level. Still, she looked at Freya with wariness. Clearly, that mature vixen was one of the thieves. Remember, you only have a week. Act fast. Freya nodded, but then, A nefarious thought flashed within her corrupted mind. Will Master also give me that kind of reward? Certainly. Freya beamed, but Jasmine's eyes burned with fury. What kind of reward could that be? Obviously, it was the sexual kind. She wrapped her arms around Conrad's neck to signify ownership and glowered at Freya. Look, bitch, he's taken. Go get your milk elsewhere. And instantly, Conrad's forehead was full of black lines. Chapter 28. When 5 words crash all your plans. The nerves. Who the hell are you? Submitting to Conrad was one thing. Being verbally abused by a nobody was another. As a pure-blooded, golden-eyed lioness, if there was one thing Freya didn't tolerate, it was being disrespected by those she deemed inferior. And while Jasmine's cultivation had risen to the first step true knight rank, Freya didn't put her in her eyes. Your new mistress, Jasmine announced with complacent glee. But at that time, Conrad chose to bring her back to earth. Actually, if Freya can complete her task, I might promote her. I'm the master of the contracts and can adjust them however I wish to, meaning that I can also modify yours if I wish to. Do I wish to? Conrad murmured while rubbing his beardless chin, and his words caused Jasmine to unfasten his neck and stare at him with stupor. You tricked me, she complained while aiming her now wobbling index at his self-satisfied face. I am a demon. Tricking is my birthright. That girl was too brazen. If he didn't start putting some shackles here and there, wouldn't she try to overturn the world, wanting to deprive me of my beauties? In your dreams, I will have you, and I will also have them. Now that you've joined my household, you cannot escape. So, you might as well make the best of it. Think of this as a test of virtue. If you perform well enough, who knows what will happen in the future? Initially, Freya had been incensed by Jasmine's rude and possessive behavior. But now all discomfort had been replaced by deep satisfaction. A woman's status in a polygamous husband's house often depended on the dowry she brought. She was going to bring more than 50 million purple crystals. Could that little maid compare? When I'm promoted and my cultivation restored, I will properly deal with you. She inwardly swore with a radiant smile. And Conrad, who had unobstructed access to her thoughts, couldn't help but blink. Hum. Back to proper business. For how long is your pass valid? The reason why Freya could come and go within the palace was that thanks to Else, she had obtained an imperial pass. That pass was only granted to women that had strong connections to the inner court and could only be used for a certain amount of time. Past the deadline, renewal was necessary. Freya had been using hers for some time already and should be close to its expiration date. I still have 3 weeks. That's more than enough. While she completed the task, he would make some additional arrangements and gather as many resources as he could. It's unfortunate that I have to leave this female paradise so soon. Oh well, to enjoy beauty, you first need to breathe. Although he managed to keep his neck so far, Conrad didn't want to take extra chances. Even if he held no interest in the faraway barbarian continent, he wasn't going to sit and wait for the Holy Flame Church to come knocking on his doorstep. How was that different from courting death? He could return with great pomp when he was powerful enough. The girls were sent on their respective ways with Jasmine still fuming and pondering her future course of actions. Conrad then woke Ralph and Alan, his 2 eunuch subordinates, and gave them errands. Ralph, your job is to contact Hans for a new business opportunity. This time, tell him to get ready for an auction. But the goods are not things he can take responsibility for, so he should prepare accordingly. Just tell him that we're going a full grade higher and insist on the plural of the goods. I give him 4 days, and will send someone to deliver them when he's ready. As for you, Alan, I want you to obtain a complete map of the Imperial Palace as well as the hierarchy and cultivation levels of guards at key locations. The more you can find, the better. You have 3 days. The Imperial Palace was not a mill. You couldn't get out because you wanted to. And even with Conrad's current cultivation level, escaping it would be no simple feat. Hearing his task, Alan was puzzled. Are you trying to smuggle something in, or? But the glower he received from Conrad shoved the rest of his words back down his throat. I hope I do not need to remind you of the importance of discretion. Execute these tasks well, and I will handsomely reward you." It seemed he attached extreme importance to those tasks. That being the case, there surely was great wealth to obtain. "Rest assured that we will not fail you," they proclaimed, and immediately went on their ways to tend to the tasks. As for the kitchen shifts, to hell with that. For the sake of great wealth, they could certainly endure some punishment. In any case, the weather was not that good recently. It was time to call in sick, and seeing them disperse, Conrad no longer wasted another second and headed toward the embroidery department to meet Ileana. With the news of her new status having spread, her treatment had undergone drastic changes. The title of maid was removed and replaced with that of honored palace guest. She also received an entire courtyard and several maids to attend to her daily needs. But although on the outside it appeared this change was out of consideration for her changed status, it was nothing more than a new way of monitoring her. If they truly wished to show consideration, they could have just sent her back to her household. But they didn't, and perhaps until the day her father died, she would have to stay within this mockery of a golden cage. From times to times, the figure of the unruly Conrad would flash within her mind to improve her otherwise sullen mood. But today, as she sat at the edge of the spring where they had wrestled for their lives, it wasn't in her mind, but in the spring that she saw his figure manifest itself. Really? Am I now starting to hallucinate? She wondered with a frown. Not quite. But then again, I suppose I am the physical manifestation of all female fantasies. A smug voice came from her back. She spun, and her eyes widened to the sight of Conrad, who looked at her with his usual mischievous grin. "Don't flatter yourself. Beside Daphne, no one fantasies about you," she retorted. Daphne had not wasted any time to corrupt her ears with Conrad's exploits, something she most definitely didn't want to be aware of. "Why is it that I sense the unique smell of jealousy? Because you're a conceited man-whore? Flattery will get you anywhere. Unredeemable." But through that small exchange of words, her mood had already been lifted. "Since I've nothing better to do, I might as well listen to all the nonsense you have to say." From her tone, it looked like she was doing him a mighty favor. But Conrad was well aware that should he now turn heels, the quality of her day would only worsen. He sat by her side, and for the next hour, brightened her mood through stories and pleasantries. They were now lying on the ground by each other's side, and unbeknown to her, Ileana's head was getting increasingly closer to his. "Do you want to leave the palace?" "Of course I do, but that's impossible," she replied to his inquiry. "That might not be true. If you want to leave, it's not difficult. Kiss me, and in a week when I'm ready to leave, I will come to fetch you." "What?" Ileana turned toward him with incredulous eyes. "You want to flee the palace?" "Flee is such a terrible word. I'd rather say I want to go sightseeing." And hearing the confirmation from his lips, concern replaced Ileana's initial shock. "Don't be rash. If escaping the palace was that simple, many would not have died trying to do so. Not everyone was willing to spend a lifetime within the confines of the imperial palace, and many had died trying to escape it. I will naturally not do something I'm not certain of. If I say we're ready to leave, then we are ready." While his confidence had alleviated some of her fears, Ileana still wasn't convinced. "If you can really pull it off, no need to say one. I can give you 1,000 kisses. You got yourself a deal. See you in a week." With that said, he stood up. "Leaving so soon?" Ileana blurted out, then realized she had betrayed herself. "Oh, is that longing I feel?" "Humph." But as she turned her gaze away from his, he planted a soft kiss on the right corner of her lips, then vanished in a haze of light. "Unruly," she cursed with her cheeks flushed red. Following that little escapade, Conrad returned to his assigned kitchen duties and handled both his work and his errand boys to avoid raising too many questions. But while he prepared the last radishes, a trio of eunuchs walked into the small kitchen. From their attire, it was clear they were head eunuchs. "Are you the low-ranked eunuch Conrad?" asked the one at their helm. "I am indeed. What can I do for you?" "The Holy Empress summons you." The radishes he held within his hands dropped onto the ground while his black eyes widened and droplets of sweat formed on his forehead. Are you sure there isn't another Conrad? Chapter 29. I respectfully decline. So fast? How was that possible? Conrad was not just taken aback by the head eunuch's sudden words. He was horrified. The timing was too perfect for this to be a coincidence and made him reminisce how his predecessor had been sent to his maker. You know, I'm sure there must be a misunderstanding. With such a vast inner court, an innumerable amount of Conrads must exist. Surely, you've mistaken me for another one, but fret not. I won't take offense. By the way, Conrad is not even my first name. It's just a nickname used by the buddies. My real name is Darnock. Yes, Darnock. Have a good day? He politely replied while picking up his radishes. For the first time in his life, he clung onto legumes with greater passion than he would a woman. The head eunuchs exchanged confused glances. Why was that boy having such a strange reaction? Could it be that they'd really gotten the wrong person? Impossible. They had especially been instructed to come to this place, and his face perfectly fit the Conrad's description. Are you challenging the Holy Empress verbal decree? The most senior of the three asked in a threatening tone. How could I dare? But I'm only a small fry within a sea of giants. I have no connections and only tend to legumes and cooking within this small kitchen. How could the Empress have ever heard my name? To say nothing of my name, how could she be aware of my existence? That's why I say you must have found the wrong person. My life is not important, but if you accidentally offend the Empress, the consequences. His voice trailed with a long, sorrowful sigh that caused the trio to question the accuracy of their information. His words were logical. Only one with significant background could enter the Empress' sight. Who was he to receive the honor of being summoned by Her Majesty? It made absolutely no sense. For an instant, they didn't know what to do. Should we first go back to verify the information? Go back empty-handed? How are we to explain the failure of such a simple task? If we have to fail the task, at least let's have something to show. Also, that boy looks fishy. Yeah, Darnock? Isn't that Conrad in reverse? Does he really think we were born yesterday? Sons of bitches. Was it not for me not wanting to risk getting ahead of myself? I would have already slapped you to death. Damn. Conrad silently cursed while being dragged toward the Empress Palace. And following a series of teleportation circles, he was brought to the entrance of a massive residence that stretched across 2 hectares with tall supporting pillars evoking ancient Greek architecture. Without ceremony, the eunuchs pulled him inside and brought him over to 2 personal attendants that awaited their return. During all this time, Conrad adopted the meek and submissive attitude befitting a low-ranked eunuch while silently cursing all the ancestors of his guides. Soon, they reached a white marble door in front of which the 2 attendants stopped. Your Majesty, the eunuch has been brought over. In a creak, the door opened, and the 2 attendants led Conrad inside a brightly lit room where 13 other attendants played card games alongside a silver-haired woman whose eyes had yet to meet Conrad's. You can all leave, she declared, and instantly, the attendants by her sides as well as the 2 that brought Conrad over, all exited the room. The woman then rose to her feet, but Conrad, who kept his eyes locked onto the ground below, couldn't appreciate her beauty. Why this sudden display of bashfulness? As I recall, when you shattered Wenzel's jewels, you didn't have such reservations. End. My life ends. But then Conrad recalled the blurry sight of the woman that saved his and Jasmine's lives and vainly hoped that the one standing in front of him was his mysterious savior. Hum. Your Majesty must be jesting. How does a little servant like me dare harm the belongings of the 6th prince? I do not have that courage. Even at the pillory, he would not admit to it, but his words caused a light chuckle to escape Verina's lips. Look at me. Conrad's gaze rose and fell upon a sight that forced him to stare dazed for a few seconds. In terms of beauty, beside that mysterious, blurry figure, the woman in front of him effortlessly eclipsed all those he had ever met. But that beauty didn't just come from her natural charms. It came from her unfathomable cultivation that caused every strand of her body to ripple with subverting force. And although she spoke gently, the irresistible might of a ruler surrounded her ever words. Stand straight. I want to take a good look at you. Driven by her irresistible voice, Conrad let go of the submissive display and stood at full height. Verina's hands were clasped beneath her back as she walked circles around him with nods of approval. Not bad. 17 years old, 5th step Grand Knight, 8th step True Priest. Sky-high innate strength, speed, and resilience. I can even see a perfect dual cultivation physique. Outstanding. He was like an open book for her to browse through. Nothing could escape her gaze. The situation was terrible. I can see why Else is so fond of you. You can be trained into a true powerhouse. The holy consort was fond of him? Verina stepped away from Conrad and sat in the middle of a blue velvet armchair with her mesmerizing legs crossed and her right cheek resting on her fist, causing her curly silver hairs to cascade on the right. But with those words, Conrad realized she couldn't see through his bloodline. It's rare for such an outstanding human being to exist outside of the barbarian continent. Where are you from? Her following words confirmed it. But although Conrad's apprehension had drastically shrunken, his vigilance remained intact. I was born and raised in this holy flame city. Your Majesty can easily verify this by checking the records of the eunuchs. I've already done that, but I don't believe it. You entered this palace as an ordinary eunuch boy without any cultivation, and in a matter of a few months, your cultivation skyrockets to the current level? Not possible. You either deceived your examiners, or someone helped you deceive them. Or perhaps, I'm looking at this the wrong way, and you're a completely different person from the one that entered the palace. Horrifying woman. Conrad fought hard to control his heart rate and prevent body movement from betraying him. Your Majesty is jesting. The Imperial Palace is a well-known place of opportunity. There is no rule stipulating that those of high cultivation cannot enter as eunuchs. I merely believed I could build myself a grand career within these walls and concealed my cultivation from my examiners to avoid trouble. It's not like they had the means to see through it. No need to justify yourself. I do not care about your identity, about your origins and connections to the outside world. I do not care about Wenzel. None of these are the reason for your presence here. I want you to serve me. To abandon all allegiances, you might have to anything or anyone else, and serve me wholeheartedly. Become my pawn if I want you to, and my knight if I so command you. Agree, and I guarantee that within 5 years, I can make you a semi-saint. And before you turn 30, I will help you achieve sanctification. Verina offered with her silver eyes locked on Conrad and observing his every move. Odd. Why was there no fluctuation within his mood? I respectfully decline. His explicit rejection caused her to stare blankly for a few seconds. Did you not hear what I said? I heard, and I respectfully decline. His words intensified Verina's suspicions. Did you not say you wanted to build yourself a career? A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity now stands in front of you. Why do you reject it? My apologies, Your Majesty, but I'm only a small fry. I have no intention of becoming a pawn in the inner court's political intrigues. Please forgive me. What a joke. Wanting to turn me into a tool for your political warfare? Are you out of your mind? I am always the one to play women. When was it time for the roles to be reversed? Wanting to bait me with the hope of sanctification? In your dreams, I, your father, will become a god. Who cares about sanctification? Chapter 30 Bargain. Just because of your fears, you are going to forego such an opportunity? Don't you know that in danger lies great reward? I didn't peg you for the spineless type, Verina admonished with a disappointed tone. However, Conrad was unmoved. Your Majesty, may I ask you at what age did you become a saint? At the age of 400, she replied without blinking. 400. At what age did the emperor achieve sanctification? 600. The holy consort. 200. Good, very good, Conrad murmured while restraining the abundance of curses within his throat. Even the country's #1 talent took 2 centuries to achieve sanctification. That being the case, what makes you think you can help me achieve it in less than 30? Conrad slowly spoke to prevent himself from flying into rage. Was she openly making fun of him? When even she took 400 years, she had the nerves of claiming she could help him reach that altitude before he turned 30. What a joke. But naturally, Verena was prepared. You can't do it with traditional cultivation, but if we combine your talent with an appropriate dual cultivation method, you still have a chance. Usually, no matter how gifted, and regardless of their method's level, dual cultivators cannot go beyond the transcendent rank. That's because the holy path requires purity. Dual cultivation is fast, but mixes the spiritual energies of its practitioners, thus creating imperfections and a gradual lack of purity that forever blocks them at the peak of the transcendent rank. The answer to that is for the partners to practice the same method from the cradle while regularly going through spiritual harmony rituals. Just like Conrad's 100-flower scripture, spiritual harmony rituals allowed the participants to establish and perfect a spiritual connection. Not many people are willing or able to expend the resources required to train a pair in such a way, but I can. If you now submit to me, I can give you a high-grade holy rank dual cultivation method and provide you with the perfect partner. We will waste some time to have you retrain from scratch, but before long, you will return to your current level. That holy rank dual cultivation method was one of Verena's secrets and a gift from a formidable high-ranking member of the Celestial Church. Thus, although she had never used it, she was well aware of its might. But while this was all very pleasant to the ears, Conrad was unmoved. As a pure-blooded incubus, the problems of dual cultivation didn't apply to him. That is only the first issue. The second issue is, you obviously want me to play a certain role in your contest with the Holy Consort. A harmful role. Offering a dual cultivation method meant that she was already aware of him not being a eunuch. At this point, there was no need to pretend otherwise. I do not have the boldness required to stand between the Holy Emperor's most beloved women. That is, at best, suicidal. And forgive my frankness, but although you're still the most favored, the future doesn't seem to be holding anything good for you. Those last words caused a frown to appear on Verena's face. What makes you think I'm the most favored? To the outside world, it was common knowledge that Else was the Holy Emperor's favorite consort. Why then was that eunuch claiming otherwise? Honestly, it's obvious to anyone that dares ponder the question. The Holy Consort's background is not inferior to yours, but it is well known that she surpasses you in terms of beauty, that her cultivation talent is leagues above yours, and that her influence stretches far beyond your reach. That being the case, with the Holy Consort's vast ambitions, why do you still bear the Empress crown? Because the Dowager is your aunt? No, the Dowager has long since stopped caring about matters of the court. The answer is that your Majesty is the Holy Emperor's most beloved. Thus, he's unwilling to demote you. Conrad confidently analyzed, causing Verena's interest in him to rise. Not bad. Would that can be carved? She clapped with amusement. Since you know that, but that is only for the time being, Conrad dryly cut. No matter how resilient, the tree will ultimately be dislodged by the unrelenting storm. Your Majesty is the tree, and the Holy Consort the storm. 10 years? 15 years? 6 months? Time matters not. If her current rise is not stopped, she's bound to overturn the sky. There was one last thing he hadn't said. What was the need to pledge allegiance to someone that would ultimately belong to him? But instead of getting offended, Verena's smile grew brighter. Are you not afraid of your words upsetting me? Your Majesty claims I've harmed the 6th prince. Yet, my head still hangs on my shoulders. What is there to be afraid of? Good, you've relaxed. It was true. Conrad's initial apprehensions had vanished, and he faced her straight and unafraid. Your analysis is correct. I've been lying dormant for too long, and things are starting to get out of hands. I do not care about what else does beyond the walls of the inner court, but within, it is time she learns moderation. Although you are not interested in the power I can offer, there must be something you desire. What is it? As long as it is something within my ability to grant, I will grant it. Conrad's first thoughts went to the bountiful cleavage beneath his eyes. But quickly that thought was set aside. All things in due time. However, it was now clear the Empress' desire to obtain him was too strong to be brushed off by a simple refusal. And perhaps too strong a rejection was a surefire road to an early death. There seemed to be something, a relationship to the holy consort that made her target him. Therefore, it was time to bite. I do have one dear wish. Ileana cracked. Please return her to her family. Hearing his request, incomprehension flashed within Verina's eyes. Is that all you want? I can give you a lot more than that. That is all I want. If your majesty can accomplish that, I do not mind serving you for a year. Because in 1 year, I have no doubt that you included, the entire imperial harem shall fall under my absolute control. If I cannot escape, let's reverse the game and turn the inner court into the fortress and weapon that shall protect my secret and repel my enemies. Since you women so desperately want to play with me, let's play and see who burns. Very well, your wish will be granted. Tonight, Ileana Cracked can return to her family. Do you not need the Emperor's permission first? After all, isn't he the one that placed her under house arrest? Although it was due to Elsa's intrigues, it was the Emperor that promulgated the decree that forced Ileana to enter the inner court. But Verina's next words caused Conrad to re-evaluate her. Within the inner court, I am the Emperor. Beneath that mask of elegance and gentleness hid an overbearing creature waiting for the opportunity to soar. Perhaps the most ambitious one had yet to show her fangs? Conrad couldn't help but feel some pity for the holy emperor whose most beloved women most likely only had his destruction in mind. I wish to escort her back to House Cracked. Suit yourself. I will provide you with a special pass to freely go in and out of the imperial palace. Verina's immediate agreement took Conrad by surprise. But then, he realized it was not carelessness but naked confidence. She was a saint. If she didn't want him to escape, within the 6,000 square miles of the Holy Flame City, he couldn't escape. But I still have one question. Why did you choose me? The answer will not affect my future course of actions, but it will allow me to lower what remains of my guard. In all honesty, I was at first merely curious. Very few can receive anything other than disdain from else. But you actually seem to have her affection? That piqued my curiosity and made me wonder what was so special about you. But now I have a different idea. I believe you can help me tame all those unruly consorts and in time, even help me achieve an old dream of mine. From those words, the masked woman's identity was clear. As it turned out, the one to whom he owed his life was the holy consort. But that didn't make Conrad feel at ease. He wasn't conceited enough to believe such a mighty woman so easily smitten by his appearance. Thus, although he could not find her in his memories, she must have had a profound relationship with the previous Conrad. That being the case, what if she found out the truth? What would her reaction be? Hopefully by that time, he would be prepared. Damn Lesser Conrad, you are already dead. Why are you still creating so much trouble for me? I promise you that when I get my hands on the bitch that caused you such harm, she will beg for death, yet be unable to obtain it. So just rest in peace. Chapter 31 Manbreaker. Afterward, Conrad was relieved of his kitchen duties, promoted to the rank of head eunuch, and given new quarters. Verina also promulgated a decree allowing Ileana to return to her household on the very same day. That decree spread within the inner court like wildfire and alarmed all its knowledgeable denizens. But while they expected Elsa's immediate counterattack, they were disappointed to hear nothing of her side. Meanwhile, at Elsa's palace, Your Grace, now that the Empress ordered the release of Ileana, shouldn't we take the opportunity to strike? Tamara cautiously asked. But Else, who laid on her side within a gray velvet sofa, remained unfazed. What is there to gain? We could lure out and ambush Wolfgang Crack to remove that trouble once and for all, Tamara exclaimed, but seeing the lack of reaction from Else, she quickly became confused. Since you can think of it, others also can. We are not the only ones wishing for Wolfgang Crack's demise. Why dirty our hands? when many are already planning to use the opportunity to butcher him. This is an excellent opportunity to see if we have a full measure of the man. Tamara believed Else overcautious, but didn't dare comment any further. But why would the Empress suddenly override the Emperor to order such a thing? And although the answer was clear to her, Else didn't reply. As the center of the news, Ileana was naturally the most astonished and incredulously stared at the complacent Conrad now standing in front of her. How did you pull that off? I was born with divine charm and irresistible appeal. The Holy Empress was moved by my presence and conceded to my every demand. He shamelessly boasted while puffing out his chest. Utter nonsense. Ileana naturally didn't believe that the Empress had fallen for his tricks. Could a saint be so easily swindled? In any case, you now owe me 1,000 kisses, so go prepare your lipstick to cover me with red. Shameless. But a deal was a deal, so she would have to comply. I am shameless. Mightily shameless. What, do you know any great, bashful man? No. The first characteristic of a great man is shamelessness. And I am beyond the boundaries of greatness. Ileana stared slack-jawed at that outrageous display of impudence, and seeing her waste time in pointless staring, Conrad decided to take the bull by the horns, hauled her on his shoulder, and pulled her back toward her quarters. What are you doing? I know I'm a fantastic specimen, but I can't afford to have you waste time in bewildered stares when I have smooches to get. Since you're so concerned about face, I will have to rearrange our deal to receive and give. Wait. But wait, he would not. And so, Ileana was dragged back to her bed and pulled into a consuming session of smooches. MHM, not there. Time flew by in a flash, and Conrad's body was now covered with red lipstick marks while Ileana's was full of hickeys at unchased spots. How can I face my dad like this? She complained with her flushed cheeks held within her palms. Just tell him that you've been marked by his future son-in-law. Defeated, Ileana could only rearrange herself and prepare for the imminent departure. The Empress had granted them an escort of 4 royal ladies at the middle stages of the Archknight rank. Naturally, that escort wasn't meant merely for her protection, but also as an additional show of goodwill toward Count Wolfgang, her father. With the descent of night, the group departed from the imperial palace through a teleportation circle. At the gate, a luxurious red and gold carriage driven by a head eunuch awaited. They embarked, with Conrad making sure to keep the flushed Ileana pressed against his chest. We are not alone, she whispered in a mental message. Glad to see you know where your priorities lie, he replied in kind. In any case, once we get to your family's mansion, you won't have to worry about my misdeeds for quite some time. Hearing that, a stinging sense of loss burst within Ileana's chest and her struggles collapsed. With 40 million citizens and 6,000 square miles, the Holy Flame City was the largest of the Holy Continent and perhaps even of the entire ancient crystal world. Yet, not everyone had the means to put a roof above their heads. In fact, with commoners being unable to own land, they had to rent whatever dwelling they possessed from either nobles or the imperial court. The latter being the primary source of commoner lodgings within the Holy Flame City. Commoners and slaves constituted the 2 lowest social classes and had drastically different statuses. Commoners could choose to be servants, but slaves only had that option. Humans were the primary source of slaves within the Holy Continent. Their status within the 3 empires and 28 kingdoms that composed the Holy Continent was meager. They were either waiters, housekeepers, farm workers, or prostitutes, with the latest being the most lucrative option. Commoners, on the contrary, had the right to own a business which they could operate by renting space from the authorities or some noble. For that reason, having a half-human bloodline had always been a source of great mockery for Ileana among children of nobility. As for human nobles, in the 100,000 years long existence of the Holy Flame Empire, while more than one powerful human eunuch or maid had appeared, not one human noble house had managed to establish itself. All potential in that area was squashed in the cradle. But within the barbarian continent, the situation was radically different. The carriage moved past the streets at moderate speed, the horses carrying it spared of rough handling. But while Ileana subconsciously snuggled against Conrad's chest, large scalding spears of golden flames flew from the shadows and shot toward the carriage. Conrad's demonic instincts kicked in, pulling him into awareness and causing him to kick open the door to carry Ileana out of harm's way in a rapid leap. The 4 Archknight royal ladies were faster, summoned their energy swords coated in a variety of elemental powers, and flew to meet the flame spears. The deafening noise created by the collision sent the carriage spiraling into the air, and the poor horses and head eunuch to violently crash onto the ground with eruptions of blood and a fatal fate. Again? Negligent. I was negligent. Conrad rebuked himself as they landed on the ground. The situation had just settled within Ileana, who stared at the repelled court ladies with horror. Golden Flames, the 2nd Division of the Holy Flame Knight Order? I don't understand. Why? As the highest power of the Holy Flame Empire, the Holy Flame Church was composed of more than priests. They possessed their own personal knight order trained in 4 different elemental flames that made up for 4 divisions: the White Flame, the Golden Flame, the Blue Flame, and the Innate Flame. Each possessed its own unique ability, and each represented a division of the Holy Flame Knight Order. Without a shred of doubt, the attack came from the 2nd Division. But why? This time Ileana didn't believe that the Holy Consort had anything to do with this. But she would get no answer. 5 armored figures emerged from the shadows, illuminating the night sky with the golden flames swirling around their forms, and carrying great flaming swords which they hurled at the royal ladies bearing their paths. The elemental affinity and aura bursting from their form made their Archknight status evident. More precisely, 3 were mid-level Archknights while 2 were of the high level. Conrad wasted no time to bolt alongside Ileana. It was impossible for the royal ladies to hold them back for long, if they could even hold them back. And although they were confused by the sudden, harmful appearance of members of the Holy Flame Church, the ladies didn't waste time in idle chatter and met their assailants with their elemental swords. Alas, one of the 2 high-level Archknights managed to slip through and pursued the pair at breakneck speed. They didn't have time to cross 2 blocks before the blazing figure of the 2 meters tall Archknight stood in front of them. Conrad quickly assessed the perimeter. As far as the eye could see, there was no living soul. There never was in cases like these. At his back, the royal ladies had already fallen, and the remaining Archknights were breaching the distance toward them. That was to be expected. Although their cultivation was high, those ladies spent all their time within the inner court, while those men were trained warriors used to work in tandem. The power gap was enormous. My family doesn't have any enmity with the church. Why target me? Ileana snarled with soaring rage and hatred. She was almost there, so close to returning to the warmth of home. But those hateful creatures had reared their heads and shattered her dreams. Why? You don't need to know. You only need to follow us, and no harm will befall you. As for the pretty boy by your side, he can only blame himself for being at the wrong place, at the wrong time. The knight facing them stated, and his words caused Ileana to despair. Conrad, however, was surprisingly calm. His gaze went beyond the knights at their back and locked on the 4 royal ladies that now laid lifeless in a pool of their own blood. Once he confirmed they were indeed dead, and that no undesirable witness remained, he heaved a sigh of relief. But to Ileana's ears, it seemed more like a sorrowful one. Conrad, I'm so sorry. Sorry for what? If anyone should be sorry, it's them. All traces of apprehension vanished from his gaze, and he stared at his assailants as if facing dead meat. You really should have just let us leave. But hey, we should all be free to choose the date of our deaths. And since you've so crudely chosen yours, I absolutely don't mind seeing you off. His words caused the surrounding knights to wonder if he had gone insane from fright. But when he released Ileana from his grasp, an overwhelming demonic energy burst from his body in a whirlwind of violet flames. They were alarmed. Awaken and bring them all to their knees, Manbreaker. He stretched out his hand, and from the whirlwind of violet flames emerged a terrifying jet-black war hammer engraved with purple veins that glittered with extreme demonic might. And as soon as it appeared, boundless suppression force crashed onto the Archknights, and as if gravity had increased by 1,000-fold, it pressed them all onto their knees in a resounding thud. Chapter 32 Hidden Dragon. Conrad clasped his hands around Manbreaker, his lineage weapon, and locked its enormous suppression force on the assailants. His eyes shone with purple light while his body bathed in violet flames. But although the scene was akin to the one that marked Freya's subjugation, this time, Ileana felt neither lust nor enticement. A crushing force carrying the unconstrained desire to dominate was the only thing at play here. Worse, that purple-veined weapon seemed to beat with a will of its own and corrupt Conrad's eyes with its eldritch force. As for the Archknights, the three at the mid-level could not resist Manbreaker's horrifying power, while the two at the high level struggled to get back onto their feet with clear dread within their eyes. How can this be? What is a pure-blooded demon noble doing in the heart of the Holy Flame Empire? Who summoned you? Regardless of their might, lineage weapons were a privilege of the noble houses of the infernal realm, and it was usually impossible for members of such houses to appear within a mortal world without being summoned by powerful cultists. To say nothing of the infernal realm's nobility, even lesser demons needed summoning rituals. Thus, the knight assumed Conrad had been brought straight from hell by some barbarian cultist and snuck into the Holy Flame City for a nefarious purpose. As if any of that mattered now, Conrad whirled Manbreaker into the three suppressed knights, dislodging and shattering their skulls in one deft, circular motion, then shot toward the two high-level Archknights that had managed to regain their motion abilities. But although Manbreaker didn't entirely suppress them, their fighting capabilities had been severely weakened, with their strength somewhere around the first step Archknight rank, a level Conrad paid little attention to. The two knights exchanged a glance and saw confidence in each other's gaze. Although the situation had experienced a drastic change, they could see Conrad's energy signature of the 5th step Grand Knight rank. Thus, although they were now stuck with the battle power of first step Archknights, they didn't believe they couldn't handle him. Executing demons was a great merit. Perhaps they could use it to obtain high-level baptisms and have their cultivation soar. In tandem, they shot toward him, the golden flames coating them burning brighter, and the flaming broadswords they dragged searing the ground below. Die! Their broadswords came crashing on Conrad in dual cleaves, but he didn't evade, standing still like an unmovable mountain. Clang! Spinning Manbreaker above his forehead, he deflected the two incoming blows and caused the knights to fall off balance. They somersaulted to get away, but how could he allow them to retreat without a price? White-purple light erupted from his body, a perfect replica of himself appeared, and the two Conrads shot toward the falling knights. Bang! Two identical hammer blows crashed into the knights' chest, shattered their chest plates, and sent them spiraling into the air with blood spurts. But Conrad gave them no time to regain their foothold and pursued with his hammer brandished. Hateful! How can a Grand Knight possess an attribute, and such a powerful one at that? They could see that Conrad hadn't just created a doppelganger. His light attribute just made him so fast that he seemed to be at two places at the same time. For his cultivation level, that was inconceivable. Healing Flame. Their golden flames kicked into gear, healing their wounds at breakneck speed. The golden flame of the 2nd Division could not only be used to destroy, it could also mend physical wounds and increase the body's vitality. Oh, interesting. Let's see how many blows you can repair. The two Conrad became 4, and each rained hundreds of hammer blows down the still healing knights. Crack, crack, crack. Their armors collapsed, their bones cracked, and they flew backward with hundreds of overlaying blood-red hammer imprints covering their bodies. Aarg! The knights howled as they tumbled onto the ground. Again, they exchanged glances, but this time, despair was the only thing they saw in the other's gaze. This is not something we can handle. Retreat. Too late. The 4 Conrad once again became 2, turned into purple beams of light, and appeared by the fleeing knight's side. Shortening my cuddle time is a cardinal sin. Two precise hammer blows that shattered his knees crippled the left knight's legs, while a descending smash crushed the right one's head. He didn't even have time to wail before life left him. As for the left knight, his screams pierced the night sky. The extra Conrad then vanished in a purple haze. All this happened in the span of a few breaths and shocked Ileana to the very core of her soul. What kind of horrible weapon is that? She didn't have a clear knowledge of the infernal hierarchy and didn't understand what a lineage weapon was. However, if the Archknights of the Holy Flame Church considered it enough to brand Conrad as a pure-blooded demon, then he indeed was one. But wasn't he just a half before? What was going on? Conrad had yet to pay attention to her thoughts as he stepped closer toward the disabled knight who desperately crawled away from him. "Spare me. I can tell you who wants to capture her. This isn't worth my life," he pleaded, but Conrad was unfazed. "I'm sure the ladies you slaughtered wished they could have seen the morrow. Since you didn't grant them that courtesy, why should I give it to you? As for figuring out who is behind this, that is simple." Conrad slammed Manbreaker onto the ground, causing a screeching sound to spread within the air and purple flames to dive into the knight's forehead. His pupils dilated, and he stopped struggling. Who wishes to harm Ileana? A joint force between a semi-holy priest of the Holy Flame Church and Hausleitner, the knight flawlessly answered. Hearing this, Ileana's eyes widened with a mixture of enlightenment and incomprehension. Hausleitner was the maternal family of Alex, her elder half-brother. For them to make a move on her was something she could understand. But what did any of this have to do with a semi-saint of the Holy Flame Church? Could his mother have pulled some strings? But with her status and strength, how could she? Where were you supposed to bring her? Is there another ambush lying ahead? House Cracked. We were supposed to bring her to House Cracked to force Count Wolfgang to abdicate his lands, assets, and estates to his son, Alex Cracked. Ileana was horrified while confusion grew within Conrad's eyes. Regardless of birth, eunuchs cannot inherit lands. How could an exception be made for him? The semi-saint promised Hausleitner that he would help restore Alex as a man should this endeavor succeed. Bang! Having found out all he wanted from the knight, Conrad crushed his head and brought all his demonic forces back into his body. Manbreaker then vanished alongside the purple flames. In the meantime, Ileana no longer had time to worry about Conrad's increasingly demonic nature and rushed toward her family's mansion. But he wasn't going to let that suicidal move happen under his watch and pulled her back within his arms with a surge of telekinetic power. "Let go of me. Don't be irrational. Your father is said to be at the peak of the transcendent knight rank. What help can you be in matters even he cannot solve?" His words were logical, but logic was not what she wished for at the moment. "Maybe if I surrender myself, there will be room for negotiation. If I don't, maybe they won't hesitate to kill him before coming for me. I know this sounds stupid to you, but he's my father. I'm not going to hide while knowing full well that my family is in danger." But Conrad still didn't let go of her. Calmly think for an instant. A man who dares openly go against a saint, such as the Holy Consort, either possesses enormous hidden strength or terrifying backing. Most likely even a mix of both. That being the case, how could he fall so easily to a semi-saint's schemes? If they were certain of being able to overwhelm his house, why would they need to keep you alive? You are not the only hostage that can be used to pressure him. Your family mansion probably has more than one. His words caused Ileana to snap out of her erratic behavior. He was right. If she was the apple of her father's eyes, then her mother was his heart. For her, there probably was not much he could not give up. Let's first observe the battle fluctuations from a safe distance and assess the situation. If something goes wrong, I can let you throw away your life. He lied. Should House Cracked show signs of defeat, he would knock her out and leave. Meanwhile, within a courtyard of the lavish mansion belonging to House Cracked, Count Wolfgang was being surrounded by a quintet of 9th Step Transcendent Knights and a dozen of 5th Step Transcendent Knights led by two people he was all too familiar with, his son Alex and his brother-in-law Viscount Hausleitner. Although Hausleitner was of Uridal descent, they had declined and had not managed to produce a count in the last 3 generations. Nobility may be hereditary, but the titles were not. Without a cultivation of at least the six-step transcendent knight, one could not become a count. Father, you brought this all to yourself. You are cruel and merciless, not only favoring that bastard daughter of yours over me, but also making me suffer a fate worse than death. That being the case, don't blame me for not taking the blood we share into account. Today, I will avenge my mother, avenge myself, and pay you back for all those years of misdeeds. Alex snarled with a face distorted by hatred. As a child, he had always wished for his father's affection, but though gifted in the use of pen and sword, the only thing he received was a cold, unfeeling stare. That he could have tolerated, but what he could never swallow, was the sight of his mother choosing to enter priesthood to avoid the humiliation of sharing her husband with a human maid. And with his father's recent show of cruelty, all love he ever felt was replaced by uncontrollable rancor. His blood craved revenge. But seeing his outburst, and the gathering meant to corner him, Wolfgang was amused. With just this sorry lot? Once a disappointment, always a disappointment. Even in rebellion, you fail to excel. He scorned. Viscount Hannes by Alex's side took his attitude as a last show of dignity. Wolfgang, although you're one of the mightiest Uridal counts and close to the semi-holy rank, you're still, after all, a ninth-step transcendent knight. Today we have 5 like you trained in battle arrays. What can you do? You might as well be sensible and abdicate your lands, wealth, and estates to Alex. The plan was that once Alex received the assets of Housecracked, he would marry into Houseleitner and change his surname to theirs. That way, they could swallow all the Cracked's power and sharply rise. But as the cold wind blew his long green hairs, Wolfgang burst into derisive laughter. My father repaid the life-saving debt he owed yours by marrying me to your wretched sister. I have fulfilled all my filial duties to him and have nothing more to give you. But since you dare collude with the worm of the Holy Flame Church to assault my house, all of you can die. 3 pairs of golden light wings sprang from his back while a battle-axe appeared within his hands. Slash. He swirled the battle-axe in a dazzling arc of light that sent the heads of the 15 transcendent knights flying toward the starry sky in an eruption of blood. Then he stepped into the air, hovering above the crouching forms of Alex and Hannes, who looked at the illusory ring above his head and the 6 golden wings with horror. Incomplete ring, 3 pairs of golden wings, third step semi-saint? How why? I don't understand. Alex blurted out with sweat and disbelief twisting his face. Why hide such powerful cultivation? What is there to gain? You would now be a Margrave, ranking among the highest nobles of the empire with peerless prestige and glory. Hannes roared more out of bitterness than anything, realizing that he had been duped. I am an Uridal. The nobility of my blood is proven by the deeds and history of my house. It needs no ornaments such as trivial titles to demonstrate its loftiness. Only inferior ants such as yourself find delight in such vainglory. Wolfgang's highest honor will always be the surname Cracked. His battle-axe descended upon Hannes, splitting him in half from the top of his head all the way down his groins. Hannes' blood gushed forth, drenching the still confused Alex red. He still couldn't understand why the flawless plan had so suddenly turned into such a debacle. But seeing the clear disdain within his father's green-slit eyes, Alex's terror was replaced by a new bout of fury. Why look down on me? Why despise me so? What's the difference between her and me? I am your son. But to that heartfelt roar of indignation, Wolfgang only replied by crushing him under the pressure of his semi-holy force, then further humiliated him with a contemptuous laugh. My son? Look at yourself, sprawling insect. How could you ever be qualified to be the son of Wolfgang Cracked? I have never touched your mother. How could you be my son? And in less than 5 seconds, Alex's world collapsed. Chapter 33 I am your son-in-law. A lie. It had to be a lie. Alex didn't believe the words to be anything more than cruel lies. Don't lie to me. You have already disowned me. What's the need of inventing such lies? What need is there for a giant to deceive an ant? My father ordered me to marry the daughter of the previous Viscount Leitner to tell the world that House Leitner could still count on the support of Housecraft. That was all so that he could repay the man for saving his life at the cost of his own. Their camaraderie was heartwarming, but brought my noble name untold disgrace. Because your mother is nothing more than an Aravista whore. I knew it from the start. Every man of high nobility knew how easy it was to spread her legs in exchange of benefit. All my peers knew how she fawned on the mighty and disdained the feeble. But I had to wed such a creature, because such was my father's wish. There was evident resentment within Count Wolfgang's voice as he reminisced the past. We are all free to live our lives as we choose. Therefore, while promiscuity is not something I'm particularly fond of, I do not outright despise it. However, those who see others as nothing more than tools to advance their social standing and sex as a mean of entrapment profoundly disgust me. Thus, while I did marry her, I have never touched her. As we walked into the bridal chamber, I recall that she was overjoyed. But when she realized she could be nothing more than my wife in name, she started looking for new, better options. And 50 years ago, she found your father, a semi-holy priest of the Holy Flame Church. Alex staggered and fell onto his rear with his trembling legs spread and disbelief consuming his eyes. It's not possible. A lie. It has to be a lie. Please stop. He clenched his hands around his head, his nails digging past his hairs and almost drawing blood from his skull. Believe if you want to. Do not believe if you don't want to. But know that no matter how evil, a tiger will not eat its own cub. Were you my son, were you my only male bloodline, I would rather kill you than cripple your manhood. Your life is a lie, a devilish ploy orchestrated by your repulsive genitors to take over my house. A mixture between an opportunity for promotion and the mean to satisfy their greed. But I pitied you, the whelp that asked for nothing. So, I gave you an education, hoping you could be upright. I taught you martial arts, hoping you could defend yourself. But most importantly, I gave you my name. Yet, you dare consort with evil to bring harm to the hand that raised you? Ungrateful worm. Even if you were my son, I would still butcher you. Wolfgang's battle-axe cleaved the air, aiming for the stupefied Alex's neck. But as the blade approached his flesh, droplets of tears streaked down his cheeks. Tears that caused Wolfgang's axe to stop and his face to contort into a frown. What? After decades of existence, you cannot even die with a minimum of dignity? But those weren't tears of fear. They were tears of sorrow and regret. For Alex, who had always craved his father's love and a united family, Wolfgang's revelations were too much to bear. Thus, unbeknown to him, warm tears drenched his face. Father, I'm sorry. Wolfgang may never see him as his son, but for him, he would always be his father. That no blood connected them couldn't change that fact. And although he had never received his love, at least there was a time when he could count on his care. A time he clung on. Unbecoming. But Wolfgang's axe didn't go further. Instead, his mind, for an instant, drifted to memories he wished to suppress, and his frown grew deeper. Dad, look at the words I wrote. Did I do well? Dad, I have mastered the sword stance you taught me. Are you happy? Dad, why do you never smile when you look at me? Did I do something wrong? Dad. With a kick, Wolfgang sent Alex flying across the air to crash beyond the walls of his mansion. Let this be my last show of leniency. In your lifetime, never appear before me again. Otherwise, I do not mind executing you. Following those words, Wolfgang's battle-axe vanished, and in a twister of golden light, he flew into the distance, trailing the path Ileana's carriage should have taken while spreading his holy sense to watch out for her presence. As for Alex, he dragged his trembling, bloodied form and vanished into the distance. The truth. I must find out all the truth. But it wouldn't be the last time they met. And in time Wolfgang would come to acknowledge that what he now saw as an inexcusable act of weakness would prove the best choice of his entire life. Meanwhile, Conrad and Ileana had barely departed for the cracked mansion when a beam of golden light flew across the sky and stopped above their heads. The light vanished, revealing a tall, handsome man that seemed to be in his late 20s. He was dressed in a long black robe, with wind-blown green hairs, sharp-slit emerald eyes, and a stern, restrained stance that showed an outwardly rigid demeanor. Naturally, he was Ileana's father, Wolfgang cracked, and when his eyes met Ileana's, the sternness of his face was replaced by boundless love. "Dad," she muttered, stopping dead in her tracks and staring at the floating form with incredulity. Wolfgang descended onto the ground, landing in front of Ileana with his 6 golden wings vanishing into light particles. "Little girl, Dad must ask for your forgiveness. Dad is useless and could not take better care of you." Wolfgang's apologetic tone and eyes caused Ileana's already misty gaze to be overtaken with tears. Tears of joy that freely trickled down. "Dad." She threw herself into his arms and let her warm tears moisten his clothes. "I'm here. This time, Dad will never let you go," Wolfgang pledged while stroking the back of his beloved daughter's hairs. 10 years ago, he was indeed at the 9th step of the transcendent knight rank. But the pain and helplessness caused by the loss of his only child caused him to drown himself in torturous cultivation. Torturous cultivation that allowed him to go all the way from the 9th step of the transcendent knight rank to the 3rd step semi-saint in just a decade. He was now 200 years old, and if his breakthrough speed didn't dwindle, he was very likely to become a saint before the age of 300. Something few in the history of the Holy Flame Empire could accomplish. As for Conrad, who observed this scene from the sidelines, his heart was full of grievances. Is fate playing a joke on me? How could the first father-in-law be a 3rd step semi-saint? I say you might have hidden strength, and you appear with 100 times the expected might? In the future, how can I bully your daughter? Fuck. However, shock was one thing. Demeanor was another. Conrad stood straight with his arms crossed beneath his back, giving an air of extraordinariness and nobility that, who might that eunuch be, was entirely ruined by his head eunuch clothes. Conrad staggered, and hearing her father's inquiry, Ileana couldn't prevent a chuckle from escaping her lips. "He's, hum, allow me to introduce myself," Conrad cut, seizing the initiative. "I'm your son-in-law. Nice to meet you, father-in-law." He greeted with a polite bow. Bang. Eoarg. But as soon as those words left his mouth, Wolfgang sent Conrad flying with a palm strike. The Gauls then roared in indignation. Ileana yelped and rushed toward Conrad's side to check his pulse. "Father, how could you be so brutal? He's your no, my savior," she exclaimed with her cheeks slightly reddening as she finished her words. And seeing the care with which she pressed Conrad's head against her chest, Wolfgang frowned. Huh. To Count Wolfgang's experienced eyes, this scene oddly seemed like an episode of the conquered daughter taking the party of her love in a familial clash. And as for Conrad, who simulated unconsciousness while feeling the softness of Ileana's chest, he inwardly jubilated. Hee, father-in-law, we've just met that you helped me take another mighty step in my relationship with your daughter. Why didn't I meet you before? Thank you. Chapter 34. If you can receive my fists, I give you 5 seconds to cut the act. Otherwise, I will split you in half. Wolfgang's roar caused Conrad to open his eyes in a heartbeat and sweep the perimeter with astonishment. What? What happened? Oh, my head. I'm being assailed by monstrous headaches. Help. Conrad howled while clenching his head and pressing it harder against Ileana's chest. For real? Let me check. The evident concern within her eyes caused him to further push the act with strong nods and false demonstrations of pain. Count Wolfgang flew into rage. When did the daughter he carefully raised become so easily deceived? That boy had to be butchered. Boy, I warned you. You can die. He summoned his energy battle axe and was about to drive it into a fatal arc when Conrad promptly rose from the ground and stood straight like an arrow. Hum. No need to be so dramatic. After all, as in-laws, we should first learn more about each other and establish the foundations of a healthy familial relationship. As an elder, you should be the one taking the lead in such matters. Yet, since your arrival, you've only been causing trouble. You should reflect on yourself. He admonished with the stance of a disappointed senior lecturing a junior on his many failures. Trickster. Impudence. Ileana and Wolfgang roared like a choir, but Conrad remained complacent and unfazed. Humph. Ileana snorted, stood up and walked back toward her father's side, with the two now eyeing Conrad with a mixture of rage and vigilance. But seeing that he had lost his dignity as an elder, Wolfgang straightened himself, turned his attention back to Ileana and asked, "Where did you find that mobster? You said he's your savior?" Wolfgang's inquiry caused Ileana to snap out of her exasperated state. "He saved my life at multiple occasions, once within the palace, and another one today. He also saved Daphne's and helped me reawaken her from her coma. And he's the one that managed to convince the Holy Empress to allow me to return home," she explained with warmth flashing within her eyes. Wolfgang didn't need to hear more. And although he couldn't comprehend how a young eunuch managed to convince the Holy Empress to cancel the Holy Emperor's decree and return his daughter to him, he still was grateful. Thus, his view of Conrad underwent a 180-degree change. But the words that followed caused him to almost spurt blood and all goodwill to turn into fury. "She is omitting a lot, like our many embraces under the moonlight, or all the smooches within her bed, and even the cuddles on the way here. Speaking plainly, although she tries to put up a strong front, she's my wife in everything but name. We might as well sign the papers and move on to consummation. Father-in-law, do you agree?" Ileana's cheeks burned with a flaming red while her eyes widened in shock. She hadn't expected Conrad to be bold enough to retell those events in front of her father, and seeing her reaction that showed shame but no rejection, Wolfgang drove his battle-axe in a ferocious cleave, turning air pressure into blades that shot toward Conrad. Aarg! He turned into purple light particles and narrowly dodged every single one of them. "You even dare dodge? Today, if I do not beat you half an inch into death, I am not surnamed Cracked." Wolfgang snarled and shot toward Conrad, replacing his axe with his bare fists that threateningly approached Conrad's face. "Catch me if you can." Conrad once again turned into purple light particles, intangible particles immune to physical harm. In that form, he bypassed Wolfgang's fists and instantly reappeared by Ileana's side. So fast? Is that truly just a grand knight? Also, why have I never seen that kind of light attribute? Attributes were not all of the same level. Some inherently ranked above the others, while there were also opposite attributes that mutually canceled each other out. Light had always been a mighty attribute, possessing great regeneration properties and endowing its user with enormous speed. However, Wolfgang had never seen anyone able to turn into intangible light particles or being able to deploy such speed in the Grand Knight rank. Is he possible that he's a secret disciple of the Holy Empress? He wondered. But at that time, his thoughts were interrupted by another display of insolence. Hum. Killing me will not change reality. Your daughter's heart has already been snatched by me, and in any case, you need a man to carry on the male bloodline right. I promise you top-notch genes and dragon-like descendants. Satisfied or reimbursed? He complacently declared while wrapping his arm around Ileana, whose mood fluctuated between bashfulness, shame, and rising fury. But when she opened her mouth, her words caused both Conrad and Wolfgang to stare blankly. He slept with Daphne and all her attendants as well as many other palace maids. Dad, please beat him senseless. Conrad, you have the nerves of proclaiming me yours when you have been fooling around with so many women? Even shaming me so wantonly? See how I rectify your misdeeds. End. My life ends. Conrad turned heels and was about to make a run for it when Wolfgang's tall figure reappeared in front of him. Even though Daphne is more hostage than consort, she's still an imperial consort. Before the emperor could touch her, you slept with her? Wolfgang asked in a slow, grave, and increasingly terrifying tone. It appears I did. Conrad didn't evade, preparing for the worst. But to his and Ileana's astonishment, Wolfgang burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. Good son. Good son. Serves that dog emperor right. In the future, you must bed more consorts. The more, the better. Damn son of a bitch. His thunderous laugh pierced the sky and hammered Ileana and Conrad's ears. But although the change was brutal and sudden, Conrad took the bull by the horns. That was always the plan. And with those 5 words, Wolfgang's appraisal of him rose to another level. Good. Very good. I can see that you are a man of high virtue and talent. My daughter's eyes are truly outstanding. You will definitely have a bright future. So I give you an opportunity. If you can repel 10 of my moves at the same level, I don't mind betrothing my daughter to you. In any case, it's clear that she's already lost. Conrad's eyes lit up, his lips formed a radiant smile, and he immediately complied. Agreed. Agreed. I hope you won't renege on your promise. I am an Uridal. My word is my bound. As for Ileana, who had suddenly turned into the price of a sparring match, she failed to adjust to the situation. But then she recalled something, and worry appeared within her eyes. Conrad, my dad is a pure-blooded nature serpent king. His speed, flexibility, strength, and resilience are all top-notch. If you are not careful, you can easily be grievously wounded. She believed that Conrad's terrible strength mostly came from his demonic weapon, and that without it, he couldn't receive a blow from her father at the same level. And the thought that he could end up unwittingly injuring himself because of her caused discomfort to spread within her chest. Hey, weren't you the one asking him to pummel me a moment ago? Now the opportunity has arrived. Why hesitate? Could it be that you can't bear to see me harmed? Unredeemable. I am just warning you in good faith. Since you don't appreciate my goodwill, you're on your own. Even at the gate of hell, she would never admit to it. In all honesty, it's your dad you should be worried about. The world is vast, but within the same level, across the entire holy continent, I fear no one. The self-assured declaration that contained no hint of arrogance caused Ileana to doubt her previous assessment. Their mental exchange ended, the contenders put a suitable distance between one another, and Wolfgang lowered his cultivation to the 5th step Grand Knight. If you're not feeling confident, you still have time to concede. Father-in-law, worry not. I won't go too hard on you. Conceded. Wolfgang channeled his stainless spiritual energy within his right fist, controlling his power to perfection, and shot toward Conrad at breakneck speed. Conrad stood still, revolving his own spiritual energy within his fist while preparing for the collision. While he had no doubt his body was much more powerful than Wolfgang's, his control of spiritual energy was after all lacking when compared to the experienced warlord. This was also an opportunity to test how outstanding that body of his truly was. Wolfgang aimed at Conrad's chest and threw a full-force punch which Conrad met by hurling a blow containing the entire might of his bloodline, physique, and spiritual energy. Bang! Their fists met in an ear-splitting boom. Conrad staggered, taking 3 steps backward with a blood trail falling from the left corner of his lips, while Wolfgang flew across the night sky like a meteor and crashed into the distance. Chapter 35. Did you prepare the dower? Dad! Ileana yelled as Wolfgang's body crashed into concrete. Alarmed, she rushed toward him, but by the time she reached his side, he was already standing up. Unlike Conrad, however, besides dust and a trembling fist, there was no visible damage on his body. Your name? Conrad. Good. Very good. You are by far more outstanding than I believed. With such battle power and cultivation talent, you are bound to become a mighty saint in the future. Entrusting my daughter to you, I have no worries. But although he let nothing transpire on his jubilant face, Wolfgang was horrified. In the ways of the Holy Flame Empire, he was of the previous generation. In that time, his bloodline and physique ranked among the best within the entire country, and only a rare few such as the Crown Prince could surpass him. Never did he expect that in a contest of 10 blows, he would be sent flying with a single one. And while he didn't sustain as much physical damage as Conrad, that was because his true cultivation was leagues above his. Was he truly at the same level, his current state would have been unimaginable. As for Ileana, only now did she realize how much she'd underestimated Conrad's true might. Odd, she could swear he didn't possess such a tyrannical physique when they were first attacked. Is demonism that powerful? She wondered while her father straightened himself. Conrad, on the other hand, didn't feel like there was anything wrong with this. He was piling up bonuses upon bonuses with his bloodline, physique, and cultivation method. A different result would have been odd. Let's return to the mansion. A feast awaits. Wolfgang gave none of them time to complain, warped them in golden light, and flew back toward the cracked mansion. With a semi-saint leading the way, the trip would only take a few seconds. They bypassed the gates and landed at the doorsteps of the main hall. Unceremoniously, Wolfgang opened it, bringing the two inside the hall lit by artificial white light orbs that hang below the high ceiling and on ivory pedestals. As soon as they stepped past the door, Ileana and Conrad were greeted by a procession of aligned butlers and maids forming two perfect lines on the right and left, while in the distance, a small group of individuals whose body features reminisced of the usual cracks stood with radiant smiles. Leading them was a beautiful woman with auburn hairs held in a high chignon, and a pair of eyes that would seem identical to Ileana's, was it not for hers being the normal circular pupil of the human race. She was Ileana's mother, Zamira. Ileana, welcome back. Young lady, welcome back. Led by her mother, the relatives and servants warmly welcomed her, and their voices caused her eyes to once again be overrun by warm tears. Mom! And without restraint, she ran into her mother's grasp. The painful decade of isolation had finally come to an end. She was home. It's all right. Now everything is going to be all right. As for Conrad, who witnessed the scene, he, of course, had nothing to say. A moment afterward, Zamira's eyes rose from Ileana and locked onto him, at first taking him for Ileana's escort, then reckoning that knowing her husband, the escort would not have been able to go beyond the main gate on this particular occasion. Who might that young man be? Although he was dressed in eunuch clothes, she didn't wish to strike at his dignity by reminding him of that. But Wolfgang's immediate reply caused her and the entire hall to fall silent. Your future son-in-law. The procession was quickly reduced to a scant few close relatives that, alongside the main protagonists, entered the dining hall. At the firm insistence of her father, Ileana was given the honor seat, a position that allowed her to keep all the gathered individuals within her eyesight. What no one had expected was that Wolfgang also arranged a seat for Conrad to stay by her side. The servants were quick to serve the wine, and Wolfgang to raise his cup for a toast. To the return of my beloved daughter and the arrival of her betrothed. But the relatives who still were digesting the news could not reply, struggled to give a prompt reply. Dad, please stop. Ileana interjected, not knowing where to put her face. Stop what? I didn't hear you reject the gambling match. In fact, you seem to be more concerned about his safety than mine. Ah, the sorrow of raising a daughter. Wolfgang's words only caused more confusion within the gathered relatives, with Zamira not being able to keep her mouth shut any longer. Could you explain the situation? She asked with apparent confusion. That is simple. Your good daughter came back with Conrad, who presented himself as our son-in-law, which she didn't deny. I have tested the goods, and it is fine material. The next generation of Housecracked should be outstanding. Even at the pillory, he wouldn't admit that he had been sent flying with one fist at the same cultivation level. Pooh. But his words caused Conrad to spit the wine he was leisurely sipping and the gathered individuals to show strange expressions. You have tested the goods? What do you mean by that? But no one dared call him out. Instead, they let their odd stares do the talking. And quickly, Wolfgang realized the error. I mean to say that I've tested his cultivation. Truly outstanding. He should not be older than 17, but has already reached the 5th step Grand Knight rank. His foundation is also rock solid, and can certainly compete with the 9th Prince. The ninth prince was the youngest of the imperial princes and the most talented after the crown prince. He was 18 years old, and his cultivation had already reached the ninth step Grand Knight rank and was rumored to be very close to the Arch Knight rank. But although they all knew Wolfgang wasn't a man to speak lies, they had a hard time believing that out of nowhere appeared a man capable of rivaling with the second most outstanding imperial prince. Zamira, however, cared very little about any of that. Her eyes moved between Ileana, who fidgeted within her chair, and took furtive glances at a Conrad, who nonchalantly held the empty wine glass within his hand. Why do I have a feeling that my daughter is being sent into a lion's den? Or is it a wolf's? Also, why is it that Wolfgang so readily agrees? This is fishy. But as she looked at Conrad, his eyes suddenly rose to meet hers, and he greeted her with a radiant smile that seemed to be saying, "Hello, mother-in-law." Zamira came from the barbarian continent. Her temper was wild and unrestrained. If something annoyed her, she would punch it, and Conrad's face gave her punching urges. Tolerance. She had to be tolerant. Very well, arranging the daughter's marriage is the father's duty. I have nothing to say. However, I have 2 questions. First, how is a eunuch fitting to wed anyone? Second, did he prepare the dower? Those 2 questions brought everyone back to seriousness. Regardless of Conrad's status within the inner court, he came out with the clothes of a eunuch. That being the case, how could he turn into Housecrack's son-in-law? But to this, Conrad was prepared. My real status is kept secret by the Holy Empress and will be revealed in a year. By that time, there will be no issue in marrying Ileana. Using the Empress as his backer, he suppressed the apprehension within those people's hearts. But Zamira wasn't done with him. Very well. The marriage is delayed for a year. Now let's discuss the dower. Can you afford a count's daughter? Before marriage with nobility could take place, unless something else were agreed, an exchange of gifts should take place. The future husband would provide a dower, and the lady's family the dowry. The dower was a constitution of assets granted to the lady by her husband upon marriage. Assets that would remain under her name and could be used for her to live comfortably should anything befall him. In a nutshell, it was security. But for Conrad, whose entire wealth was composed of 2 purple crystals and 600 red crystals, he couldn't afford that security. At least not until Freya returned in success. Ileana didn't want such things to tamper with their relationship, so she was about to speak up when Conrad's voice echoed. How much would the dower be? A fair price would not be less than 5 million purple crystals. Cough, cough, cough. Conrad's body was thrown off balance, and he almost fell from his chair. Robbery, this was robbery. But seeing no one, Wolfgang included, bat an eyelid. He realized the crux of the issue. Ileana was now the heir to Housecrack's estates. Whoever married her would one day control a substantial share of the entire Crack's wealth. Thus, how could her dower be cheap? You will receive it in a week. His words caused all the Cracked to stare at him with wide eyes. Could he really put out such a sum? However, Wolfgang had something else in mind. Actually, I do not want a dower from you. My daughter will never need to rely on it. There is, however, something she needs. Something you can obtain for her that is worth more than 1 billion purple crystals. But know that there is substantial danger involved. Danger because you stand to offend many powerful parties. All eyes instantly fell on Wolfgang. What would that be? Conrad asked without blinking. This year's quota for a holy flame baptism. If you can obtain it, we can sign the contract right away. I can even ensure half of my family's estates will directly fall within your hands. Conrad was astonished. Housecracked was leagues above the likes of House Schuner, and their net worth was absolutely close to 1 billion purple crystals. Half of it was a monstrous wealth. What kind of benefit could that holy flame baptism bring that Wolfgang would be willing to give up half his house for it? You may not know this, but children of nobility receive flame baptisms from the church. The higher the father's nobility rank, the more quotas they can obtain. Those flame baptisms enhance spiritual energy, physique quality, and cultivation talent. As the daughter of a count, Ileana should have been eligible for 4 flame baptisms. But due to her previous status, that was impossible. Now, Although she's perfectly eligible, she's past the age limit. One quota could be used every 3 years up until the age of 20. However, that is inconsequential. If you can obtain that one holy flame baptism, her cultivation and talent will skyrocket. The opportunity comes only once in 100 years, and the date is approaching. Many outstanding children of high nobility will fight for that quota, and it's not impossible that imperial descendants will be present. Therefore, if you choose to fight for it, you will definitely offend many people. What is your choice? Agreed. With the transformation skill to hide his true identity, Conrad wasn't afraid of smacking some pompous nobles. And if they annoyed him, he would just take the opportunity to snatch their women and expand his harem. Maybe even if they didn't, he would still snatch them. Chapter 36: Ileana's Night. The rest of the night was eventful, with Conrad working on taking down the vigilance of his mother-in-law, while not forgetting to tease Ileana. As the feast came to an end, and the servants started removing the dishes, Conrad brazenly followed Ileana back toward her chambers. In the meantime, Wolfgang walked into his study with Zamira by his side. Tell me the truth. Why did you choose that boy? Was it only for the holy flame baptism? Having known him for decades, she didn't believe Conrad's cultivation was the only thing that grabbed his attention. And indeed, she wasn't wrong. What is Ileana's greatest challenge at the moment? With the rise of her status, many sons of margraves and dukes that do not stand to inherit land will try to woe. And suddenly, Zamira's eyes shone with enlightenment. Right. In the past, they disdained her and didn't wish to bring her lack of legitimacy into their households. But now that she's my heir, many of those that don't stand to inherit land will be willing to court her and marry into house cracked for the sake of our lands, assets, and wealth. This is a rare opportunity. Thus, among those nobles, even the younger sons of margraves and dukes will be willing to fight for her. But if it were only that, I would not be afraid. The problem is that the von Jürgen will also want a slice of the pie. In fact, I have no doubt that the 9th prince will be ordered by the Holy Emperor to obtain her hand. The law protects the sons of nobility against imperial marriages, but the same cannot be said for daughters. If we do not arrange something soon, the 9th prince will knock on our doorsteps with a marriage decree. At that time, House Krack's tens of thousands of years of accumulations will fall into the hands of the von Jürgen. Wolfgang gravely explained. That being the case, we might as well quickly let her marry a man of her own choosing. That Conrad's talent is earth-shaking, and he seems to have a profound connection to the Empress. House Kvass has always been our backer, so there is nothing wrong with that. Moreover, I have no doubt he's someone that dares go against the imperial family. This is the kind of son-in-law we need. Else cannot be allowed to rule the Holy Flame Empire, but neither can Ulrich von Jürgen. The longer he reigns, the greater the danger this country faces. Thus, he must be overthrown. Meanwhile, Ileana was sitting on her well-preserved bed and enjoying its warm touch, a touch she'd almost forgotten. However, a certain intruder prevented her from thoroughly relishing the moment. Naturally, that intruder was Conrad. He was currently lying with the back of his head on Ileana's lap and humming a 21st century tune. Do you really not know the meaning of propriety? How can you so brazenly walk into a lady's room and rest on her lap? If the lady allows my presence and let me rest on her lap, how can I refuse? He nonchalantly replied. Are you not afraid that I will push you down? Nah, I know you don't have the heart to do it. Conceited. You prove my conceit, right? Their brief exchange ended with Conrad extending his right hand toward Ileana's face and stroking her cheek with his bent index. I will come to visit you tonight. I reserve myself the time. If you leave your window open, I will take it as an invitation. If you keep it closed, I will take it as a no. The choice is yours. Who will leave, th? But she didn't have time to answer before he rose from her lap and walked past the door, leaving her alone and annoyed. Hateful. She cursed and rolled back into her bedsheets. Activity within the mansion soon died down, with the sound of footsteps being replaced by the quiet of night. But Ileana couldn't sleep. She walked back and forth within her bedroom, dressed in a frilly black nightgown while gnawing her right thumbnail. "What am I hesitating for? I should just go to sleep," she muttered, but still couldn't stop circling the room. That hateful boy can't be allowed to keep having his way. Otherwise, in the future, how can I breathe? Still, she didn't stop. It's a bit warm in here. Maybe I should leave the window open. Just a little, just for fresh air. And so she opened the window, leaving a large enough gap for a cool breeze to sip in, then slipped back into her bedsheets. Still, she couldn't sleep, her heart drumming with a mixture of expectation and apprehension as the minutes passed and no sign of intrusion could be heard. Like that, an hour went by. An hour that turned Ileana into an emotional roller coaster. But when she still saw no sign of Conrad's form, her heart soured. Maybe he was just playing a prank on me, she bitterly wondered. But as she laid with her face against her pillow, purple light particles approached the window from the outside and went past the narrow opening. Sneaking in, the light particles silently moved toward Ileana's enchanting figure, stopped by her side, and condensed into the form of Conrad. When his now too familiar orchid scent reached her nose, she knew he'd arrived. Still, she didn't turn, expectation and apprehension still contending within her abdomen. The unexpected then happened. Conrad pulled out a piece of cloth and wrapped it around Ileana's eyes, blindfolding her in a deft motion. Abruptly, she spun to face him, but face him she could not. Her hands reached for the blindfold, but his stopped hers. Why are you blindfolding me? Because I know that deep down, what you crave is the excitation produced by having your lover press you, yet not being able to see him. Therefore, tonight, I won't allow you to look at me, desire me, feel me, but do not glance at me. His pupils turned violet, goat horns rose from his forehead, and a large pair of wings emerged from his back as he drew her into an embrace. And feeling his arms wrapped around her waist and his warm, bare chest against hers, Ileana gave in to temptation and, guided solely by instinct, pulled him into a fiery kiss. Her energetic tongue sought his, her arms collared his neck, and her legs straddled his waist as if her sole thought was to forever keep his body pressed against hers. Conrad's hands moved up her back, caressing her silky green hairs while he lowered her back onto the bed, and the sloppy sound of their intertwining mouths and tongues was carried by the wind. From the day I laid eyes on you, you were meant to be mine. Henceforth, you are the woman of Conrad. Ileana's heart drummed against his own, her body heated by his words and touch. I am yours, she whispered with her sweet breath brushing his lips, lips that once again pounced onto hers while their hands tore the other's clothing, revealing their bare bodies to the silent night. Conrad's wings acted as cushions for Ileana's back, keeping her tight within his overpowering demonic presence as he removed the last piece of fabric and cupped her soft breasts within his hands. Their lips remained interlocked, too hungry to break. Conrad kept one hand on Ileana's right breast and moved the other down her moistening nether regions that clearly craved attention. "Immerse," she moaned through his lips, feeling his elongated fingers enter her unexplored holy land, and teasing her in ways she'd never known existed. Her excitation caused Conrad's shaft to harden against her thigh, something she immediately felt, and instinctively, she grabbed his rod within her hand, giving it gentle, inexperienced strokes while Conrad's fingers masterfully teased her clit and nipples. "Immerse." Her muffled moans grew stronger, the raw pleasure proving too much for her to remain focused on the passionate kiss. But Conrad didn't let go of her lips, keeping her suppressed within his mouth as he played with her mesmerizing body and caused her to shudder again and again under his ministrations. He then revolved the 100 Flowers scripture, establishing a spiritual connection that allowed them to bask in the other's pleasure, then moved her onto her side with her left leg kept straight and her right one bent in an acute angle while he stood behind her rear with his fully awakened shaft ready to take her. And take her he did, driving his lance home with a slow, gentle thrust that broke through her hymen and caused a jolt of pain to spread through her body. A jolt of pain that was immediately pacified by the golden light released by his rod. She freely moaned, breaking the connection of their lips. But Conrad couldn't allow her moans to alarm her household, so he seized her lips back into his, gave her a moment to adjust to his girth through gentle thrusts, and when it was clear she was ready to receive him, he began pounding. Like a tidal wave seeking to break through the dam, his gentle thrusts turned into fierce hammering that caused Ileana's inexperienced body to collapse under the rough pleasure and her butt cheeks to give hundreds of kisses to Conrad's balls. Machim, Machim, Machim. She kept moaning through his lips, but never did he let go of them, maintaining perfect control of his body while building his lover's pleasure to a high climax. The intensity of the mating reached new heights, with Ileana feeling both Conrad's pleasure and her own, a sensation that drove her mad with bliss and caused her to lose all restraints to claw onto his neck to push him deeper, faster, into her, which he did, pounding that raw pleasure into the both of them, and sending her rolling into heaven with a succession of orgasms. His lower body and the bedsheet were now drenched in her juice, but neither cared. Conrad stood up, pulling Ileana into his arms like a butterfly and pressing her against the opposing wall, while not forgetting to keep driving his rod into the pleasure spots he found and created. And after her umpteenth orgasm, he let go of his fetters and erupted inside her, marking every corner of her holy land with his warm semen. Ooh, divine son of a bitch. Their kiss broke, and Ileana's freed mouth could finally groan with the full might of her throat, a groan that sounded more like a guttural howl and probably woke more than one person. But she didn't care. The only thought within her mind was that she should have let him in sooner. Chapter 37 Mother-in-Law's My. The 100 Flowers scriptures kicked into gear, pushing the duo's cultivation to new levels. Ileana's martial cultivation went from the 8th step True Knight rank to the 1st step Grand Knight rank, while Conrad's spiritual cultivation directly reached the 1st step Grand Priest rank. As for his martial cultivation, while there was some substantial improvement, he had yet to break through the 6th step Grand Knight rank. Although Ileana's main asset was her spiritual cultivation of the 3rd step Grand Priest rank, having a perfect balance between the martial and spiritual would allow her battle power to soar. But instead of sitting and digesting his gains, Conrad stared at his new conquest with an amused gaze. Divine, son of a bitch? I've heard many things. I've heard the two separately, but together? This is a first. Ileana didn't have time to worry about any of that as her mind still drifted in its newfound plane of ecstasy. She just laid on the bed with her arms outstretched and released a deep, contented sigh that reminisced of a glutton sated with food and wine. Meanwhile, alongside Zamira, Wolfgang rested within his bed. As a semi-saint, sleep was for him optional, and he would usually spend his nights in silent cultivation. However, he always reserved 2 nights during the week to remain with his beloved. This was one such night. A night that was interrupted by a deep growl that couldn't escape his sharp senses. What? Who's harming my daughter? But before he could rush out of the bedroom, Zamira's hands pulled him back into the bed. What do you think? Who do you think? After bringing the wolf into the fold, you should not be surprised to hear the sheep squeal. As a transcendent knight, Zamira's senses were sharp enough that the noise didn't escape her attention. You mean? Wolfgang's eyes widened with the sudden realization, and he went red from fury. Under my roof? The gals. Butcher. I must butcher him. He summoned his energy battle axe and was about to free himself from Zamira's grasp when, "Are you sure you're mentally prepared for what you're about to see?" Her sleepy words echoed within his ears and stopped him dead in his tracks with droplets of sweat soon trickling down his forehead. Tomorrow. I will butcher him. Tomorrow. The rest of the night was uneventful. Ileana rested nude within her bedsheets, while Conrad sat cross-legged in silent cultivation. He was initially very close to the 6th step, and upon refining Ileana's primal essence through his incubus blood, he was ready to break through. The sky-blue spiritual energy swirling around his body took a lighter shade while his bones and muscles were remolded to a higher level. The density of his spiritual energy also rose to new heights, and he finally broke through the 6th-step Grand Knight rank. As the breakthrough came to an end, he drew a deep breath, then relaxed his muscles in a long exhalation before resuming silent cultivation until dawn announced the end of night. And so his cultivation came to a halt. Unwilling to interfere with Ileana's sleep any further, he stood up, walked out of her room, and took the road back to his assigned quarters. With the arrival of the sunlight, activity resumed within the cracked mansion. Servants carried on with their daily tasks while the cracked kinsmen assembled for breakfast. Conrad, who pulled off an all-nighter, was quick to prepare himself and join the others in the hall. Ileana would soon awaken and join the gathering, but as soon as Conrad's eyes locked on hers, she turned to avoid his gaze while not being able to prevent her cheek's temperature from reaching an unhealthy threshold. But how could he allow her to escape that easily? In the blink of an eye, he crossed the distance separating them and brought his face dangerously close to hers while staring deep into her eyes. What? Going to pretend nothing happened? The feeling of his breath grazing her lips and the proximity of their faces caused her heart rate to accelerate and her already reddened cheeks to burn brighter. During that night, she had said too many things and produced too many sounds that caused her to feel like she had no face left. If possible, she wished she could find a place to bury herself and hide for a lifetime. However, seeing that pair of eyes that openly teased her, Ileana found a new source of courage and brazenly puffed out her chest. Hum. What is done is done. I am not so weak as to try to evade reality. Since we've already done the deed, you need to take responsibility for me. The first step is to swear off mistresses. You are now my man and future husband, Daphne included. There is no way in hell you can keep having all those women swirling around you. Huh. For an instant, Conrad's eyes widened with incessant blinking. Even you don't believe what you just said? Knowing full well the nature of my blood, you know that's not going to happen. And that was precisely what she was waiting for. That being the case, we must sign a contract. Last night was not bad, but there are more experiments to do. You ought to reserve me at least 4 nights a week. 5 would be optimal. Don't misunderstand. This is all for the purpose of research and cultivation. As for the others, as long as they don't forget my status of the first legal wife, I can tolerate them. She elaborated with courage neither of them knew she possessed, causing Conrad to stagger and be overtaken by violent coughing. Cough, cough, cough. But at that time, an ear-splitting roar thundered within the vast cracked mansion. Unruly lecher, surrender your life. Wolfgang's roar alarmed the entire household, and before he could reach the bewildered Conrad, his 2 younger brothers were blocking him by the waist. Arg, elder brother, what is wrong with you? Yesterday night you announced their betrothal and the next morning a funeral? Do you want to make your daughter a widow? Viscount Wolf, the eldest of Wolfgang's 2 younger siblings and Daphne's father, asked in consternation while blocking his older brother by the waist. Quick, we need more manpower. Conrad realized that the situation was taking a turn for the worst and was prepared to make a run for it. Wolf, you damn son of a bitch, let go of me. We have the same mother. Impudence. Wolfgang sent his 2 brothers flying with slaps and kicks and was about to pounce on the runaway Conrad when suddenly an authoritative voice silenced the commotion. Enough? Zamira walked in, locking her stern gaze onto Wolfgang, who in her presence didn't dare take another step. Wolfgang, I warn you, since the rice has already been cooked, that boy is now my son-in-law. Should you harm him in any shape or form, I will never let you in my bed again. The threat was too much for the mighty Uridal Count to bear, and instantly, he went from tyrant to chicken. Yes, my lady. As for Conrad, who witnessed the scene, his eyes went back and forth between Zamira and Wolfgang. Father-in-law, I have lost all respect for you. A man who doesn't wear the pants, fully subjugated by his woman and oppressed under her skirt. What a disgrace. With Wolfgang pacified, Zamira led her daughter and son-in-law into a private study and motioned for them to sit. Unlike the people of the Holy Continent, we from the barbarian continent care very little about the so-called rules of propriety, Since you've already taken Ileana as your woman, as per my tribe's rules, I've something to give you. She then pulled out a bronze box adorned with strange markings and pushed it toward Conrad. From it, Conrad could feel a strange but potent energy signature. However, before he received it, Conrad first tackled the question that sprang within his mind. You're from the barbarian continent. While he had heard of Zamira initially being a human maid of Housecracked, he didn't believe that Count Wolfgang would be so bold as to take a barbarian woman as his consort within the heart of the Holy Flame Empire. But Zamira's next words confirmed it. That is no secret. I was the chieftain of the Borkson tribe. In a battle opposing the northern tribes to the Holy Flame Empire, we were defeated by Wolfgang's armies and my entire tribe was subjugated. The casualness of her reply made Conrad question the nature of her feelings toward her original land. Apparently, Wolfgang was impressed by my bravery and honor on the battlefield and brought me back to House Crack to avoid me turning into some malicious nobleman's toy. And then, I subjugated him. Chapter 38 Miniature Skeleton. Ileana fidgeted within her chair with shame clear on her flushed face and not knowing where to hide. The fact that last night's events had failed to escape her parents' attention and were likely to spread within the mansion through rumors and gossips caused her to feel like she could no longer keep her back straight within Housecracked. Conrad, however, was too focused on what he had just heard to spot her unease. To think that Wolfgang truly had the audacity to take a former barbarian chieftain as his consort without destroying her cultivation within the capital of the Holy Flame Empire was simply astounding. Even those margraves and dukes would probably think twice before making such a move. But Wolfgang dared. This alone was testimony to how much he cherished Ileana's mother. Still, there was something odd in the way Zamira told the events. Outwardly, it felt like she was past her tribe's subjugation, but within her eyes, Conrad found a glint that seemed to be saying otherwise. A glint that worried him. There is something I've meant to ask. How exactly did the previous lady take your arrival? It was well known that the day Wolfgang took Zamira as his consort was the day Elvira Leitner, Alex's mother, left to join the Holy Flame Church as a priestess. But Conrad felt there was likely more to the story. And indeed, Zamira's next words confirmed his suspicions. She never cared. That woman had always been looking for an excuse to righteously enter the Holy Flame Church while at the same time turn her puppet bastard son against Wolfgang. You can say that no one was more pleased with Wolfgang's decision than her. Zamira replied in an indifferent tone, but her words shocked Ileana, who previously wasn't aware of those facts. The semi-saint priest that took her under his wing wanted to use Alex to take control of Housecracked from the inside. They bet Wolfgang would never dare reveal Alex's true parentage to the outside world due to the great embarrassment that would bring to his name. After all, the higher the rank, the more sensitive one is to scandals. And to keep Alex's rage unspoiled, they hid the truth from him. Conrad was taken aback, and his eyes shone with doubt. Can a semi-saint of the Holy Flame Church truly brave such a scandal for the uncertain possibility of taking over this ancient house? This is nothing new. The Holy Flame Church has always been looking for ways to take control of the Empire's assets and nobility. In fact, many powerful noble houses are in the shadows ruled by them. The methods they used over the years vary, but as long as they can obtain what they want, there is nothing they are not willing to do. And according to Wolfgang, since Ulrich von Jürgen became emperor, the Church's infection of the Empire has been rising at breakneck speed. If the trend is not stopped, another century will be all it takes for the precarious balance to collapse. Those words caused Conrad's doubt to turn into incomprehension, and before he could voice it, Ileana spoke his mind. That being the case, why is Dad so opposed to the Holy Consort's rising influence? I don't think him narrow-minded enough that the thought of a woman taking over the Empire would trigger such a reaction from him. To this, Zamira replied with a helpless sigh. Truth be told, given a choice, your father truly wishes a person of Elsa's caliber could take the reins of the Empire. But that cannot be allowed to happen. Anyone can do it. The Church will not care. Anyone except House Metz. There is great conflict between the Church and the Metz. for it appears the Mets possess a secret artifact that has been eyed by the Church for thousands of years. In fact, for centuries, they have been fighting in the shadows, and at more than one occasion, Else was almost abducted by the Holy Flame Church. Was it not for the many hidden saint ancestors of House Metz, her current fate would at best be ghastly. Wolfgang even mentioned that 10 years ago, while Else was visiting her relatives with the Emperor's permission, the Church brazenly dispatched its troops in an attempt to abduct her. Many died, and she was grievously wounded. It took a whole 8 years before she reappeared within the palace. Thus, if the Mets are allowed to overthrow the von Jürgen, the Holy Flame Church will immediately use it as an excuse to deploy the full might of its forces and drench this country's soil with its citizens' blood. Those were shocking news. But within them, Conrad found a reassuring piece of information. If in the nearby future he was forced to clash with the Church, at least there was a chance he could count on Elsa's support. But those are boring things you can learn about on your own. Why don't you take a look at my gift? She asked with her lips curled into a radiant smile that made her captivating figure look more enticing. Ileana and Conrad's eyes fell upon the bronze box from which they could both feel that strange, eldritch power that seemed to belong neither to the spiritual nor to the demonic. What is it? Ileana asked, unsure of what that gift could be. It's a defensive artifact refined by the chieftains of my tribe for their sons-in-law as a wedding gift. I refined this 1 decade ago when I became chieftain, she explained as Conrad pulled the box closer toward himself and opened its lid. Instantaneously, dazzling light gushed forth, revealing the palm-sized miniature skeleton of a lion-headed bird around which fire, water, and storm clouds swirled. What kind of creature is that supposed to represent? Ileana asked, perplexed. It's an Anzu demonic beast. My tribe worshipped the demon god Anzu and took the demonic beast bearing his name as its totem. We refined the bones of deceased Anzu beasts into totems to protect ourselves. This one can ward off any attack, martial or spiritual, beneath the transcendent rank. Demonic beasts were the lowest echelon of the infernal realm. They were not demons in the proper sense, but creatures endowed with demonic blood and abilities often derived from a specific lineage. And unlike demons who could only be summoned from the infernal realm, demonic beasts had populated some areas of the ancient crystal world since the beginning of times. And for the barbarians who worshipped the demon gods, those beasts were seen as totems and sometimes even used as companions and protectors. But Zamira's words didn't reach Conrad. As soon as his eyes laid on the miniature skeleton, his pupils turned violet, and his purple flame mark was set ablaze. Purple flames burst from his body, his violet eyes glittered with demonic light, fiendish glyphs swirled around him, and the miniature lion-headed bird skeleton flew right into his chest, bypassed his clothes, and disappeared into his body. The sudden eruption of demonic energy took both Ileana and Zamira aback. Ileana was horrified, not knowing why Conrad suddenly revealed his darkest secret, while Zamira looked at him with a mixture of bewilderment and excitement. You are a demon? But Conrad still couldn't hear her. He stared dazed into the box where his gaze had remained locked while within his body, the miniature skeleton merged with his bones, and its power spread through his flesh, blood, and mind. 3 new sources of energy then spread within him to refine his bones, flesh, blood, and spirit. Chapter 39. Are you willing? The reason why Zamira did not doubt the purity of Conrad's demonic blood was simple. Only pure-blooded demons could resonate with totems, absorb, and refine their powers into their own. While totems usually served as defensive artifacts, that wasn't their only purpose. Their mainstream use was to serve as offerings for the demon gods worshipped by the barbarians. They were also used to earn the favor of summoned demons who could then grant them rewards and wishes matching the totem's quality. Thus, Conrad, who currently was refining the Anzu beast totem, could only be a true demon. But how can this be? Zamira couldn't understand how her newly received son-in-law had suddenly turned into a pure-blooded demon. Even within the barbarian continent, successful demon summoning was a rare sight requiring countless preparation. As for the Holy Continent, With the control of the celestial church, it had been millennia since a demon appeared in its midst. Conrad. Ileana, who didn't understand what was going on, desperately shook the dazed Conrad, but to no avail. She then turned a gaze filled with puzzlement and worry toward her mother, who didn't seem too concerned by the strange situation. What's going on? To Ileana's apparent apprehension, Zamira replied with a dismissive wave of her hand. Leave, and make sure no one steps inside this study until we walk out of it. Zamira ordered, and Ileana didn't dare delay. Her father might be tolerant toward the barbarians, but should he become aware of a demon's presence within his household, he would execute him before asking any question. As soon as Ileana went past the door, Zamira released an energy field to restrain Conrad's overflowing demonic energy, preventing it from leaking to the outside, then observed his transformation in silence. Flame, water, and storm clouds swirled around him as the tattoo of a lion-headed eagle beast appeared on the right side of his chest. The refinement of his bones, flesh, and blood was coming to an end, causing his entire body to glitter within the elemental clouds like a sublime gem. The clouds then merged with his tattoo, coloring it into a mixture of red and blue, after which all the phenomenon disappeared, and the only proof left of Conrad's demonic nature was his still glowing violet eyes. He had now obtained a transcendent-level Anzu beast physique and 3 new attributes. Thus, although his cultivation had not risen, his strength underwent a qualitative leap. Beneath the transcendent rank, not many could injure him. And when they turned toward Zamira, his eyes no longer appeared blank. However, for some reason, she felt like it wasn't Conrad that was staring at her, but an ancient, lofty creature awakened from its slumber. "Why are you not kneeling?" The voice seemed very similar to Conrad's, but the tone carried a regal air and a dictatorial power that forced obedience. It was the Flame Mark's voice, and as soon as it echoed, within the entire cracked mansion, time stopped fluctuating. Instinctively, Zamira fell on her knees with her eyes locked onto the ground, not daring to look into Conrad's. "Greetings, infernal master. My apologies for my lack of courtesy." Within the barbarian continent, demons were known as the infernal masters whose will all should obey. Naturally, Zamira, a former barbarian chieftain, held them in awe. "You may rise. I have accepted your offering. State your wish. As long as it is within my ability to grant and the scope of your gift, granted I shall." Hearing those words, Zamira's entire body trembled from excitement. This was an opportunity, the type of opportunity she had been yearning for across all those decades. "I only have one wish. That is to rescue the enslaved people of my tribe and rebuild it within the barbarian continent," she proclaimed while remaining on her knees. But the Flame Mark possessed Conrad negatively shook his head. "That wish is far beyond the scope of your gift. If you want me to grant it, you must offer more. Much more. For the sake of restoring all you lost, what are you willing to give?" The Flame Mark's overpowering voice caused a new bout of tremors within Zamira's body. Slowly, she lifted her gaze from the ground and locked it on that shimmering violet pair that produced unexpected reactions within her body. "First, may I ask what caste and house your excellency belongs to?" Before making a contract, in the rare cases where the demon was of unknown origin, such a question was common knowledge, and among the few things demons were obliged to answer to honestly. They would not take offense. "Demon Prince, House of Talroth." And although she already had her doubts, Zamira's almond eyes widened with disbelief. Nigh instantaneously, she pressed her forehead onto the ground to prostrate herself in a kowtow. "It would be my greatest honor to enter a contract of eternal servitude with your highness. I hope my soul will be enough to obtain your blessing," she exclaimed with her heart thumping from excitement. Although a master-servant contract meant the loss of her freedom and soul, she had no hesitation. Although she was initially a worshipper of Anzu, she still had no hesitation. This was no longer merely an opportunity to rebuild her tribe, but a chance to enter the house of one of the 4 kings of hell. Barbarians would drench heaven and earth with blood for the sake of one such opportunity. However, the Flame Mark couldn't make that choice for Conrad, and so, it reverted control of the body to him. I thought your only purpose was to offer guidance. Since when were you entitled to take over my body? Conrad snapped in apparent fury, and within his mind, he entered a heated exchange with the flame mark. This was a special case. Because you have not fully matured as a demon, your body automatically deferred to me to accept the servant's offering. Although he couldn't intervene in the refining process in the following discussion, Conrad was fully aware of everything that transpired. Regardless, this makes me question your trustworthiness and wonder if the barbarian continent is that good a destination. Don't be so dramatic. If not for me, you would have wasted two great opportunities. The opportunity of obtaining a new physique and the opportunity to subdue this good woman. Although this woman's cultivation is only at the 6th-step transcendent knight rank, her potential is fairly high, and you can train her into a powerhouse. Moreover, she possesses strong ties to the barbarian continent, ties you will need in the future. The flame mark did not doubt that Conrad was doomed to establish himself within the barbarian continent. Pushing the date was only delaying the inevitable. Last but not the least, dual cultivate with her, and your cultivation will increase by leaps and bounds. I can use the power I've accumulated to stop time for a day to let you fully enjoy her. But hearing those words, Conrad's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Screw Wolfgang Crack's woman? What? Afraid? Ha ha ha. Who am I to reject the call of destiny? It is a great man's duty to plant his seed within the outstanding women on his path. If she dares deliver herself, I dare accept her. In any case, since the daughter has been taken, we might as well add the mother. The flame mark approved. Well said. You are the blood of Talroth. If you want something, it is by right yours to snatch. And in time, all within this world shall belong to you. The fast mental exchange ended with Conrad pulling his attention back on Zamira, who still prostrated on the ground, unwittingly outlining her curvaceous rear for Conrad's demonic eyes to feast on. I will ask you only once. Knowing what entering my house implies, are you willing to abandon the ownership of your body and soul for the sake of me fulfilling your wish? His voice had changed from the overpowering dominator to that of a charming scoundrel, but Zamira didn't care. If anything, she felt more at ease. My people didn't deserve the fate they suffered under the armies of the Holy Flame Empire, and I as their chieftain not only failed them miserably, but got to enjoy a life of peace and opulence, while they and their descendants are being humiliated within this country. For the sake of giving their freedom back to them, for the sake of rebuilding my tribe and honor my ancestors, there is nothing I cannot give up. So yes, I am willing. Fury and unwavering determination drove her every word. Then I, Conrad of the House of Talroth, welcome you into my household. Chapter 40, Solidifying the Deal. Conrad stretched his hand toward Zamira to release 5 light purple pentagrams that encircled the two of them. Are you willing in all conscience to unequivocally abandon your body and soul to my absolute will? I am willing. To forsake any claim to freedom and enter a lifetime of servitude within my house? I am willing. To allow your life and death to forever remain in control of I, your Lord Master? I am willing. Lastly, do you pledge to devote the remaining of your existence to the satisfaction of your master and the empowerment of his house? I so pledge. An amethyst haze soared from the pentagrams, locking the two in its midst while a violet lock rose from Conrad's fingertip and dived into Zamira's chest. Violet light flew from her cleavage and imprinted her breasts with House Talrotha's mark of servitude, a purple pair of butterfly wings. Henceforth, and for the rest of eternity, you are my servant and shall count among the lesser members of my household. In return, I guarantee that you shall regain your tribesmen within 3 months. Moreover, when I march into the barbarian continent, I shall grant you the opportunity to re-establish yourself. Thus, the contract ended. Dark purple threads flew from the kowtowing Zamira to dive into Conrad's chest and forehead. Her talent was added to his. Her mind became an open book for him to browse through, and her life was his to do with as he saw fit. However, due to the vast gap in their strength, she would see no improvement in her cultivation base. At least not for now. And browsing through her mind, Conrad realized why, despite having the unconditional affection of Wolfgang, she could not rescue her tribesmen. Following the victory against the Borkson tribe, the leading nobles split the spoils through contribution. Wolfgang, who accumulated the most merit in the war, used his to take her, the chieftain, as his reward. As for the rest of her tribe, they fell into the hands of other noble houses who either abused or auctioned them to the highest bidder. Now, after 50 decades, not many of the original captives remained. There was no use for barbarian men, so their lives quickly ended. As for the women, the lucky ones saw their cultivation bases destroyed and became servants within noble households, while the unlucky ones were turned into dual cauldrons and sold to two houses, House Schöner and House Henlein. Dual cultivation was frowned upon, but it was not illegal. As for why two Uridal houses would rely on it, the answer was simple. Although without massive preparation, the limit for ordinary dual cultivators was the peak of the transcendent rank. That was a limit many were perfectly fine with. After all, within the immensity of the Holy Continent, semi-saints were few and far between, while saints were as rare as holy crystal mines. Moreover, nobles needed heirs with certain cultivation levels to inherit their titles. House Schöner and House Henlein were facing the same dilemma. They had declined, and their descendants were not outstanding enough to reach the 6th-step transcendent knight or spirit rank in a lifetime. This meant that they would go from count-level houses to viscount-level houses, a shame Uridal families couldn't accept. Thus, they decided to trade quality for success and used vast resources to obtain those Borkson women above the arch rank for their heirs to dual cultivate with. Upon processing that information, Conrad quickly formulated a plan. Fortunately, Freya would soon return with great wealth to grant him the means to strike. Also, even before that, wasn't Wolfgang about to sign off half his properties for the Holy Flame baptism? But that's something to be dealt with at a later date. Meanwhile, Conrad's eyes fell upon Zamira, who had yet to rise from the ground. Rise! His irresistible command echoed within her ears, and she stood up. But the eyes with which she looked at him no longer contained the dignity of a superior cultivator. That dignity had been replaced by the ardent need to serve. "How will you serve your master?" Conrad asked in a sultry tone, carrying invisible pheromones that caused a slight tremor within her body. "Naturally, in ways that will bring you absolute delight," Zamira brazenly replied, with her lips curled in a seductive smile. She didn't dare belittle Conrad because of his youth. However, she was confident in her skills to pleasure, skills that turned Wolfgang into her obedient little man. "Is that so? There is a price for not being able to live up to your boasting. Are you sure you can afford it?" The sexual dance had already begun. Conrad's shimmering eyes didn't conceal their urge to dominate Zamira, while hers met him with the confidence that she could take all he had to offer. That confidence pleased him, for he knew that soon, the only thing within her eyes would be debilitating pleasure. "Undress," he ordered, and she obeyed, pulling down her white dress and revealing her hourglass figure for his eyes to feast on. A predatory glint shone within his amethyst globes as he stood up and stepped toward her. She was tall, but he was taller, surpassing her by 50 centimeters. He used to peer into her eyes from above, while cupping a feel of her delicious, motherly breasts. "Imhim." She stifled a moan, feeling a jolt of electricity course through her body when his hand grabbed her breast through her lace undergarment. "You need no fabric. Tear off your undergarments." Conrad didn't realize that in moments like these, his tone would become very similar to the flame marks and carried a regal air that commanded obedience. Thus, although her cultivation was leagues above his, Zamira felt that it was only right to obey. Snap! In a sharp move, she tore off her bra, then did the same to her lace panties. Lace underwear was the current trend within the Holy Flame Empire's nobility, a trend Conrad found quite pleasing. However, for Zamira, those adornments were unnecessary. "This day marks a new beginning for you," he declared while circling her and taking all her assets into his eyes. "Past today, regardless of your feelings for your husband, he will no longer be able to please you. Past today. The dominating thought of your mind will be to shove my throbbing rod within your hungry snatch. In your many sleepless nights, it is my touch that you will crave. A craving that will unmistakably lead you back into my arms to die 1,000 times. Thin purple flames swirled around his form, desire flames born from his demonic powers that alongside his words set Zamira's trembling body ablaze. I will put 9 loads into you, 1 down your throat and 8 in your cunt. As for ass, I reserve it for another day. Conrad copped another feel, this time of her supple ass cheeks, channeling his ecstasy fingers and causing a jolt of electricity to surprise Zamira. Oh! She failed to stifle her moan, and as her excitation shot up and her sexual juice moistened her inner thighs, she realized that perhaps she was biting off more than she could chew. Still, could a former chieftain be willing to be played that easily? We shall see about that. There was defiance, a combative spirit that refused to submit to his domination easily. Good. Very good. Conrad moved back toward his seat, pushing the chair away from the table to sit with his legs outstretched. Then come, let's fight and see who first breaks. Take down my pants and work for your first load. Purple mist spread within the study, carrying with it an aromatic orchid scent that caused Zamira's eyes to glaze with lust. In normal times, with her much higher cultivation, she should have been able to suppress it. But now, she could not. It drew her in. And before she could realize it, she was kneeling in front of Conrad, unstrapping his belt and pulling down his pants. Chapter 41, Subduing the Former Chieftain. As if animated with a mind of their own, Zamira's hands freed Conrad of unnecessary clothing and revealed his still flaccid cock to her eyes. Why is it not hard? She was annoyed. Her thighs were currently soaked with her juice, while her entire body burned with desire. Still, despite her nakedness being out for Conrad to enjoy, there had been no reaction. Lust doesn't control me. I control it. It is my friend and toy. Thus, if I do not want my rod to rise, it shall not. If you want it, work for it. She didn't need to hear more, and dripped her saliva onto his meat rod, moistening it through her oral secretions before giving it gentle strokes. She could feel its positive response, the heat climbing within, the veins popping out, and the shaft slowly but surely rising to meet her lustful eyes. Slow, methodical strokes soon became fierce pumps as Zamira brought Conrad's cock to full length and unceremoniously impaled her throat onto it. The sloppy sound caused by her sudden pull of his cock into her mouth caused Conrad's lips to curl into an amused smile. Slurp, slurp, slurp. Zamira first pulled up, using her tongue and lips to play with the shaft, then quickly went back down and began sucking on Conrad's rod as if her life depended on it, causing provocative slurping sounds to spread within the study. He stretched out his right hand with pinkish flames burning at his fingertips, and gently stroked her auburn hairs while she worked him with all her savoir-faire, the sensation of her hungry throat gliding on his shaft drawing great pleasure from him. The pinkish flames covering Conrad's hands infiltrated Zamira's system, causing her body temperature to rise further and her heart rate to spiral out of control as she turned into a subdued cat within his palm. But how could she allow herself to be trounced when he had yet to put anything into her? Where would her face be? In a deft motion, she lifted her voluptuous pair of motherly breasts and wrapped Conrad's rod in between, trapping him within those beautiful assets and stroking him in a tit job while still sucking him with fast throat moves. It appears I underestimated you. Conrad exhaled a contented sigh, relishing the pleasure produced by the combination between Zamira's breasts and her vacuum-like throat. Yes, this was vacuuming. She vacuumed his pre-cum, vacuumed his dick, and while her breasts compressed him, she was about to vacuum his milk. Arg, enjoy your first load. He groaned and released a large jet of purplish semen down Zamira's throat. She had not expected the amount that burst into her mouth and almost choked on it. The sperm leaked from the corner of her mouth and nose, causing a rather comical scene. Gulp. With determination, she swallowed it all and raised her complacent gaze toward Conrad. I hope Master enjoyed my treatment. Oh, is that overconfidence I smell? Good. The higher you rise, the harder you fall. I shall make you fall completely. Without notice, Conrad pulled up Zamira by the waist, hoisting her above his head while leading her toward the mahogany table. The brisk move caused her heart to threaten to burst from her chest, but although she had already reached a breaking point, she still held onto her gaze remained challenging. Conrad pressed her back against the table and roughly spread her long, shapely legs to reveal her cunt whose juice now flowed onto the table. He revolved the 100-flower scripture, unleashed his goat horns and bat-like wings, and exposed himself in all his demonic glory, causing his overflowing sexual energy to strike at Zamira's mind. Her eyes glazed with lust, and her lips parted to form the first syllable of "take me." However, before she could finish the words, she stopped, looking at him confused and in awe with her legs still spread and waiting for him to claim her. Too soon. I must first taste you. He didn't plan to rub her clit, but to directly take her cunt into his mouth and savor her juice while allowing his tongue to explore. Which he did. He went down on her wonderful snatch, kissing the entrance of her nether regions, then spreading open her pussy for his lips and tongue to dive in. Oh, oh, oh. She moaned once, then again and again, until the sound of Conrad's oral job died, superseded by her deep moaning. Coming, coming. She groaned as her juice overflowed within his mouth and splashed his face, but he didn't stop, letting her now heightened sensitivity drive her into new realms of wild pleasure and preventing her from clenching her legs around his neck. Now, I can take you, and I shall pound you till you die, then bring you back to life only to kill you once again. Yes, do with me as you please. That was the plan. Conrad stood up, brought the crown of his shaft to the entrance of Zamira's fold, and rocked himself into her with a sharp thrust. Aya, she whimpered, and her walls tightened around his meat rod whose light spread within her insides. He pulled back, sheathed himself straight to the hilt of her cunny, then began pounding. With firm thrusts, he hammered, plowing Zamira's motherly field with none of the restraint he showed to the likes of Jasmine and Ileana. The former chieftain wasn't the type to want it slow. She only wanted it hard and fast. So hard and fast Conrad went, the sounds of her whimpering within his arms with her tongue lolling out as he pounded her cunt, superimposed with that of his balls slamming her butt cheeks to produce a profane melody that delighted the two devils on Conrad's shoulders. With reckless abandon, he kept hammering her until orgasm took him and his seed gushed into her cunt. Then once again, without warning, he pulled out, bent her over the desk to once more aligning his cock with her fold and resumed plowing that heavenly field of hers. Zamira had lost the strength to speak. Her subconscious pleasure cries, ragged breathing and hot, vibrating body the sole reminders that she was still of the living. Her orgasms replaced each other, and if in the beginning she kept track, soon she lost count of them. Vanquished, Zamira had been completely and utterly vanquished by the barbaric demon at her back. Holding her firm by the waist, Conrad kept ramming her in faster until finally he released another load within her cunt. 6 more to go. This was indeed a day Zamira would never forget, a day forever etched into her mind. And as she laid bare on the table with copious purplish sperm dripping from her pussy, and Conrad cleaning his rod with her mouth, she reckoned she could never be pleased by a normal man again. Naturally, the spiritual connection established by the 100-flower scripture allowed Conrad to feel firsthand how much of an effect he had on her. The dual cultivation session came to an end, and Conrad felt huge waves of spiritual energy soar within his body. However, at that time, the flame mark's voice echoed. Quick, concentrate the spiritual energy within your pagoda and suppress your breakthrough. Although Conrad didn't know why the flame mark was asking such a thing, he still executed himself and concentrated all his gains within his sky blue pagoda, which trembled from the invasion. Your cultivation has been rising too quickly, and although you have no problem of purity, your foundation is shallow. Your control of spiritual energy is far below your cultivation level. If not for your physique and bloodline, you would have never been able to fight across your level. Hell, fighting those of your level would have been difficult. Thus, you need to suppress further breakthroughs and tamper yourself through more battles to get accustomed to handling spiritual energy. When you have reached enough proficiency, or if a dangerous situation calls for it, you can let your cultivation skyrocket. Those words made perfect sense. While Conrad had not been feeling them due to his many assets, it was clear that his cultivation was flawed and his foundation unsteady. The competition for the Holy Flame baptism would be the perfect opportunity to tamper himself by smashing those nobles unlucky enough to fall within his clutches. He then sat in meditation to perfectly suppress his breakthrough and allow Zamira a few hours to recover. Time passed by in a flash, with a more composed Zamira now getting dressed and picking up her torn undergarments. The study had become a mess and needed immediate cleaning. She would tend to it in a bit. For now, her eyes remained locked on Conrad, who had just awakened from meditation. I have heard many things about incubi, but this is the first time I've seen one in action. I really can't believe they are all like you because you are nothing less than a sex machine, she exclaimed, still feeling sore from the hammering she'd taken. That is natural. I am supreme, Conrad boasted with infinite self-satisfaction. The flame mark then restored the time flow, and the two left the study to return to the main hall. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.